Welcome to episode 11. Can you believe that's what we're on?
It's moving.
Yeah.
Even with our hiatus.
Yeah. These are multi-hour podcasts. I was looking at how many hours we've actually recorded. And I forget what it is, but it's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
There is,
This
yeah.
is like I was speaking to some people yesterday. I truly believe this moment in time is a kind of a paradigm changing. Everybody needs to be aware and start thinking, and I think planning. One of the people I was talking to was saying their response is going to be like just watch and adapt. And I think there's a decent chance it's going to be too fast for that. We were able to do that before. It's like I had a job on the assembly line, and a lot of people got laid off, and I retrained, and they did. And this, I think it's going to be like that, and it's like there's nothing to do.
Yeah. Now, are you just talking kind of like the news in general? Are you talking about like technology?
Yeah, I'm thinking of
economy,
technology's future. Or the present, technology's present and future.
Yeah, it's the scaling up is almost outstripping like the human capacity to absorb the information, much less the new skills, much less. Yeah, to be thoughtful about it.
And the need to do that is pretty strong, I think. Where it's at least we may not be able to absorb it. I think we better plan for it, and you better start thinking about how you're going to conduct your affairs.
Kind of your pitch for like why you should listen to this show, right? Because we hash all that out for people.
Yeah, instead of you having to spend hundreds of hours thinking about it per month.
Yeah,
that's what we're doing.
Do you think that the culture is more downstream of technology then? Like, what's shaping what? Is technology more shaping the culture? And here's the reason I bring that up, because, and I really want to get into this, especially to kick things off, but it ties into your thing. Richard Dawkins had a recent discussion with Ayaan Hirsi Ali. She's a former Muslim. She was they palled around as new atheists during that era.
Yeah.
And they were at something called the Dissident Discussions or something like that, where they were on stage.
I think I saw this.
And basically, I think Dawkins was there to dissuade her, is maybe how he put it. I don't think that he thought she was actually a Christian.
Right.
And I think he came away with the impression that she's actually serious about this.
Right.
And even to the point where he now, I think, is considering himself like a cultural Christian. I think that he's basically admitted it, a cultural Christian.
Dawkins,
All of this being spurred by the Muslim takeover of culture and stuff over in Europe. So in other words, the way my wife put it was, so he's crying at the funeral of the person that he helped kill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? Yeah,
but
I see that a lot. It's like, well, you're a little late to the dance.
Yes.
What are you thinking?
So culture, and now our angle, we're mixing in that tech and thinking deeply about that. So like, where are we at culturally with these changes and what brought them?
I got an anecdote about that. I think if people are in a position like Dawkins of, fame or credibility, or they're in a position to lead other people or inform their thought, I think they have a big responsibility to like really think through everything before you get there. I was watching Sam Harris. Sam Harris is an intellectual, and he's pretty decent. He's got a big audience, big reach. Definitely an atheist.
Yeah.
But he's same thing. He's coming around saying like, yeah, no, there's probably no comparison between Christianity and Islam.
I assume only on the cultural side.
On the cultural side, it's like the results are, and so he's on that boat. But I watched a discussion he was talking about, if I can, it's been a while, but he was talking about how the Bible, the New Testament, basically like, I can't remember where it's at, but the premise was he took out of context. He said, look, Christ said, kill this man, and left it at that. He was rebutting someone. And I'm like, what? That's wild. I don't really recall that. And so I dug into it, and it was like, if a person, it was this. Oh, it was a metaphor. He was saying a king brought a guy to him and the king told his servants to go kill someone. It's like, no, Christ never said
Yeah.
kill someone. And it's like, if I had walked away 10 years ago, if I had walked away from watching that, I'd be like, yep, that's what I thought. That's what the Bible is. And it's like, that was just such a lie. And he's in a position, there's no way that you didn't, if you actually read like I did then, went to that chapter,
Yeah.
that was not at all.
Yeah.
And like literally those words that were there, but it had nothing to do with Christ, and it was a metaphor and or a parable. And it was like, well, you're just straight out lying. And I find that, either through ignorance or intentional, both of which I think are inexcusable.
Well, you got to protect yourself. I excuse me. I find that AI is really good at this particular situation because it's fast. So our thing, OR, which is linked in the description, if when I run into a situation where I'm not sure about something, I just go ping it. It takes like 5 seconds, get that answer right away, and then And it doesn't matter, like, you can come at it from any perspective. Give me all the different best arguments or who thinks what about, and like you'll have it all hashed out in under 60 seconds. And I think you got to be your own truth filter these days. You got to equip yourself.
You do. So here's the question.
Yeah.
I fully believe that you need to question everything. Your side, their side, anybody's side. You need to be pretty rock solid. Now, people don't have the time to do that. So what do you do? And I think all you can do is find people you trust. And when that trust is breached, you need to move on, right?
Oh, that's a big thing. Change and move on. So I want to rewind a little bit because, you were saying people need to be thoughtful, especially if you have some influence, then you need to figure it out. I assume, I can't speak to the intellectual honesty because I'm not inside Dawkins' head, but I assume that he thought he was being very thorough and thoughtful, at the time that he's writing something like The God Delusion. Do you think that was purely agenda driven, or do you think that he was like, no, this is how I think? I also got the feeling that he was like angry with God, like that was underlying, it seems like, from some of his interview comments. But
I've seen that. I think I've run into this. I've run into some people really polarized into their positions.
That's an interesting way of thinking of it. Polarized into their position.
And they, and several times, like really smart, top tier intellectual people. And when you dig, if you have, a few rounds of a few hours and you dig, you'll run them into something that basically they hadn't considered. And it's like, man, how did you not consider that? I mean, you are so sure of yourself.
Yeah.
Have you not like debated yourself? I was listening to this. Did John Gatto? Did we talk about John Gatto last time?
I'm not sure.
Homeschool teacher.
Oh yeah, in
New York City.
Yes.
Yes.
You mentioned some aspects of it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So anyway, he was talking about when he's written a lot of books, and they were asking him his process, and he's like, I write everything down manually, and I debate myself for months. I take the other side.
Yeah.
And I poke holes in it, and I find, and I have to let some things go because I was wrong, and and that seems like a lost art. It's all confirmation bias. It's all just finding a fact to support me.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess we should say, to be fair, a little credit then in Dawkins' direction if he is, changing the direction he's steering the ship a little bit, even if
it's something.
I mean, it's not where he was before.
Even though if you're part of the cause.
Yeah, but I guess you have to leave some room for someone like him to come around. But that doesn't mean that the damage wasn't done severe. But
and probably a lack of acknowledgement that they were the cause.
Yeah,
right.
But if you
contributing factor.
Did you read The God Delusion? I don't know if
No.
you. I mean, like a lot of it, looking back, I think a pattern for a lot of people is like something went wrong in their life. I'm mad. I'm gonna steel man this position that I'm mad at God, like whatever, or this he doesn't exist. And that book was like a convenient way to be like, yeah. That's right. But when you take the time and read it and look at it, and if you have some knowledge already about the thing that it's attacking,
right.
it doesn't really do anything.
Which is
there's
really
not a lot there
because there's not. I mean, it's like, why would you not have done enough research to really understand the position? right? Your opponent's position, in this case, religious people, Christians. Why would not Dawkins not have gone deeper? And that's what I find a little bit inexcusable, right?
Yeah,
It's
but
like,
confirmation bias is like a real thing. Like, if whoever you are, I think we've talked about this. Whatever you believe, whatever you want to believe, if you go out and like look for other people that think that or can like pat you on the back, you're gonna find that. Even for Christianity, like you can't go by consensus.
anything,
Yeah.
anything. Like I could probably talk myself into a flat Earth theory
Oh yeah.
by reading enough people's opinions on it. I saw a great video of these guys went out. I don't know who it was. There's some ancient Greek guy who showed how the circumference of the Earth. Do you know about this? Basically, he's like, what we're going to do is we're going to get on a tower and we're going to go 40 miles away, get on another tower, shine a light.
Yeah, try to measure.
Or maybe it was this one was the shadows. And that shadows, noon here versus the shadow, and figured it all out. So these flat Earth guys went out and they made a YouTube video. They were going to prove the Earth was flat by kind of recreating this experiment. And you watched it as it happened, and they're like, huh, okay, it's not supposed to be like that. As they were like confronted with the reality. Now, to their credit, they were admitting, hey, something's wrong here.
Yeah.
I don't know the results if they backed away from their belief, but yeah, we know confirmation bias is everywhere. Instead of finding the best people, I think we have a mutual friend, we talked about this, where you seek them out. They have great knowledge on the other side. Give me your best argument. Let me hear.
Yeah.
What is it? Is there something I haven't thought about? Right? Instead of trying to blow holes in your own argument, I don't think people do that much anymore.
Yeah. And when I hear you say that, isn't it mostly about just like comfort? We talk about the infantilization of people and culture, but I think it's just everyone's always trying to be as comfortable as possible. They don't want the discomfort of physical discomfort. Wrong. Yeah, like no one wants to start exercising because it's not fun. Like and you can exercise your brain, in the same way, and that's also not fun. But you don't grow your muscles unless they rip, and you do it repeatedly.
Right.
And it's the same, I think, in whatever arena.
Yeah.
But it's uncomfortable, don't you think? People just like their comfort.
That's a good point. I mean, I guess that's the point of confirmation bias is I want to be right. It's more comfortable. I don't have to question anything. I need a blueprint. I have a friend who's a psychiatrist, and long ago, it might have been before he was practicing, he talked about how we develop blueprints. And we do this early in our life, and those blueprints work pretty well, and you just get more entrenched into this blueprint, even though it could be wrong. And it's a real problem with people. And I think today with social media, you can just find confirmation bias in a second.
So the first thing that comes to mind when I hear you say that is, and now I'm not an anti-free will person, but how much of that is architected for you, that blueprint? Obviously, if you have parents in your life, they're going to be involved in the blueprint.
Yeah.
If you send your kids to school, like there's some other people that are going to be involved. The government's going to have some say. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, but that's where I think you grow up and you take responsibility of formulating your blueprint like it should be. Do you know the psychology experiment with the? I'm into the big psychology experiments with the cats raised in rooms of wallpaper that's vertical lines. Okay?
No, I haven't.
So they raise them from kittens. All they see is vertical lines. You take these cats now into any kind of situation that has horizontal surfaces, and they'll just smack into it. Their wiring is such that they can't recognize.
Does that even out after a while?
Edges. I don't know the long-term thing. But it's pretty. They're wiring a blueprint based on their environment, and I think we're definitely wiring our kids are wiring blueprints. Based on that, unfortunately,
right. And someone actually ran that experiment. Now that's what I'm getting at. Like,
how
manipulable.
Don't tell PETA.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's crazy. So you have to be your own truth filter. I wanted to bring this up because not because I'm pro tobacco, but I'm curious on your thoughts of this. Do you think there's some kind of conspiracy theory against tobacco, maybe the tobacco industry? And here's the context, okay? It seems like there's a big push for pro, marijuana, let's say. But the second you're talking about tobacco, and I feel like it's a bit political. I don't smoke and I don't vape. I don't do any of that. Like, so I don't care, but I'm just looking at the situation, the landscape. And it's like conservative people tend to like be on the tobacco side, it seems like, and liberal on, the weed side of things. And one is like really demonized and one isn't.
I've noticed this. And I think it's crazy because I lived through an era where there was a lot of money, private and governmental money, to stop people smoking, right? Pictures, campaigns in schools. And I find it so funny that it's like they moved in and, okay, pot is legal. And it's like, well, you fought so hard to make smoking, and I'm sure, and then they're finding the damage is worse with pot. It actually does, for teens, it screws their brain wiring up. I mean, it's a permanent thing that you mess up. You mess the brains up.
Yeah.
And then 39 states. I think we're past. You were saying they're pushing for pot. We're past that. I think it's 39 states now or something like that.
Yeah.
Have legalized it.
Yeah.
It's like unbelievable.
But not tobacco though. Like,
well, it's legal. It's just, but it's like you said, it's persecuted.
It does. There's not a good image. And no,
and that's filtered, by the way. Or your typical joint is not.
Is that filtered. A pun? Filtered.
That's funny.
Yeah. Well, but so we need to be clear. Like, there are downsides to tobacco. Like, you get cancer, oral cancer,
little
lungs.
Bit of downsides.
Yeah. But I've also seen that there's a distinction. If you separate the nicotine from the tobacco, there seems to be what nicotine seems to be. And again, I don't mess with that either, but it's like it's a stimulant. Like, it's like caffeine, but more like, a lot of people use it during their productive hours during the day, I've noticed, as like a thing. It's like part of their routine, like drink coffee.
Yeah.
And so there's that. And when you research it, all the research is really tied to the tobacco, and it's like really demonized, I noticed. But the main downside that I can pinpoint with the nicotine seems to be that it's addictive. That's the downside of the nicotine, as far as anyone can tell at the moment.
Sure.
So, but it's also very demonized. So you have somebody like a Tucker Carlson who's all into it, and is almost like Congress was going to shut it down just because he liked it almost. I mean, it's just, isn't it weird, that dichotomy,
Yeah, it's another example of intellectual dishonesty, I think. It's just agenda-driven. I was, Sheryl Sandberg.
Yeah.
So for the reviewer, Sheryl Sandberg, former Facebook executive, a couple companies took them from, 20 million to several billion. And a very successful woman. She published a book called Lean In. She's part of the problem, too. She's destroying women's futures. This is why women are going to end up with cats in government taking care of them. But she did a documentary just in the last few weeks on the hostages, the Hamas attack on Israel. And it's pretty interesting. She brought up some interesting points in that, just horrible. She's all about the sex crimes that went along with what happened. Heartbreaking. She has just tons of video and horrible, just a terrible, terrible thing. And her position is, I don't care what side you're on. You got to condemn that. That's not part of war. You don't do that in war, right? We have rules of engagement, and you don't do this kind of stuff. And she pointed out that many women's organizations will just ignore that and will not condemn it, because it destroys their narrative about Hamas is oppressed.
Oh,
and
sure.
It's like it's this thing where we just frame in our little belief system. Anything that contradicts that, I'm going to ignore, or I'm going to shout you down or call you names. Yeah. And I think it's a terrible thing. I think there's very few, I call it truth seekers. I think there's very few truth seekers.
Yeah.
Left.
And they'll use the dumbest tactics, you're right, because certain people that would hear you just even bringing it up would try to shut it down immediately because, like, oh, you're a man. Like, you can't even talk about this subject. Well, we all live in the same world together. What are you talking about? I hate that when it comes to, like, talking about kids and stuff. Well, you're a man. Like, you have no say. What? Yes, I do. Yeah.
Do you know Andrew Schultz, the comedian?
I don't know if I do.
Oh, hilarious guy. Anyway, he has a good bit. He's like, women, he's pretty crude. by the way. So, and I don't really know his belief system, but he's like, women, I'm with you. I support your right to choose. And yeah. He said, but in the end, we get up there to see God, and God says, what were y'all doing killing babies? We're going to be like, y'all? I think we know whose decision that was.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
And for everyone who, this is something I actually went and saw Bill Maher. I don't know if I told you that a while back, my wife and I, thinking he was a more centrist dude. And when we got there, realizing no, like not all. And I think we're the only people there that, were like us. And we like clearly didn't fit in with the crowd. But the one thing that he said that I was really surprised that he said, this is related to that, is that conservatives think that abortion is murdering babies. And then he said, and they're right. I think they're right. I just don't care. And so he was like,
honest position.
Yeah, he was honest about that, which I thought was interesting.
He's also honest about Islam. He's one of the few people on the left who calls out it being worse than Christianity, and why aren't we? How do these people support that and condemn Christianity?
Yeah. That's an odd marriage of things when you have progressives, getting on board with Islamic stuff like Sharia law. It doesn't mesh with progressive
queers for Hamas.
Right.
Like I literally saw that.
Yeah.
It's like, and they just have no idea.
Yeah, so that's interesting. But let me shift into this. I thought about this week, and maybe it's too simple and stupid to even be profound, but I was thinking, like, what's the simplest, quote-unquote, operating system that you could install on yourself to make things go well in life?
Like set of rules, kind of?
Yeah, and it's actually just one rule.
One rule.
Yeah, it's very simple, and it's don't be selfish. Just don't be selfish.
Oh, yeah. My wife, like, basically wrote a book about that.
Really?
That's...
Well, tell me about it, because I want to unpack this a little bit.
So, no, that's absolutely... It's like the root of basically all evil is selfishness, right?
Not pride. That is selfish in a way. They go hand in hand.
That is. I mean, it may be too simplistic, like you say, but if you conquer that one, you kind of win many, many, many battles.
Yeah.
Right? That's I agree with that.
Now, we were talking...
It's so profound, there's probably not much to add to that.
Well, here's the context, because we were just talking about, the left and Islam and all these things. I feel like leftism basically is selfishness. That's what progressivism is. It's packaged selfishness. Indulge yourself. Like, that's basically leftism. And of course, they put a sheen on it, like, be kind. And we all know, like, that doesn't mean, like, be kind to everybody. It doesn't apply across the board.
If they agree with you, be tolerant.
Yeah, of me. Yeah. That's what it is. But I feel like Peterson talks about this a lot. You can have compassion that's narcissistic. And I know there's someone in my life who I could be like, that would be their blueprint for stuff. And not only is it narcissistic, but they want to talk about, anytime that they, have either a compassion, usually just a compassionate view rather than actual, like, doing something.
Right, what have you actually done?
Yes, it's so that's sort of interesting. And then to tie in our Christian faith into that, I feel like who's the most unselfish figure,
That's Christ, and you see it in every, like, it's a thread throughout basically most literature.
Yeah.
I remember reading Tale of Two Cities when I was young.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like...
It's a good one.
I mean, he gives his life for his friend. And, yeah, I mean, that's the pinnacle of non-selfishness.
Yeah.
Selflessness, I guess we should
say. But it's funny because you're always talking about your human nature. And this comes up constantly on our show here, like, are humans basically good or are we fallen, But if that's your operating system, it goes against your nature to be unselfish. That's why it's hard.
Right.
And I very much think, like, the hard things are worth doing. That could apply for, like, business. It could be, like, working out, like your studies, whatever. But that is a hard thing to go against that selfish desire, but that's where all the benefits in life come from.
That's it. And it's, I talk about life as a continuum, maybe a life well lived, of eliminating selfishness. So you get married, you've got to suppress some selfish
Oh,
tendencies,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
You're working with someone else. If
Right.
you're going to have any harmony, you got to do that. Then you have kids. It's like you got to give more, right? And you just keep giving more and more. And I think that's the thread. And I think people who go, into their 20s, 30s, 40s, and one, don't get married, don't have kids. It's like all they're living for is themselves,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's like the pinnacle of selfishness. Now, throw them out there at 38 and trying to get married and have kids. It's like I don't think that's probably going to go nearly as well as someone who hasn't established that blueprint.
Yeah,
as we're talking
for lots
about
of reasons.
selfishness.
So you brought that up, and now I'm thinking that's a funny thing, talking about kids, because the left would frame having kids as a selfish thing. Like, that's selfish. The environment can't handle that right
Yeah.
now. You're
No,
selfish.
I mean, I think I wrote something in school about selfishness versus self-interest.
Okay, I was gonna bring Adam Smith up, but you brought it
Yeah,
up.
and this wasn't even economical. It's just this idea that, I think ultimately, people, even probably religious or conservative people, act in self-interest. It's like, if you're a Christian, it's like I'm gonna die. I want to go to heaven. I'm looking out for myself here. I want to get to heaven. If you, boy, having kids is in my, is in my genes, and I want it. But the point is, in that situation, once you do that, now you have to start to become less selfish. The intent may have been out of self-interest.
Yeah.
And I talk about, I distinguish selfishness from self-interest in that selfishness is typically at someone's expense, right? Where self-interest, you do something, that benefits me. No one would call, hey, I'm going to move this so I don't stub my toe as I leave the room. No one would call that selfish.
Yeah.
I'm acting out of my own interest. But if I go change the TV channel that someone else is watching, and they were watching it, well, that was kind of selfish. That did something to them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And so, that's a good point. To suck economics into this and to bring in, Adam, because that whole self-interest thing, that's a great way to describe that instead of selfishness. We all exist here on the planet, in the country, in your town, even in a household if you're, have a family. And so nobody is just an island unto themselves. And so you can't just do the most selfish thing all the time, because you're going to bump into other people and there's going to be pushback. Like, it's just the natural dynamic.
Yeah.
And I guess
we keep structuring society such that people can and do get away with that for decades.
And want to.
Right. Yeah.
And
they don't realize, and what's funny is, at least people I run into in life like this, their effort to just continually try to please themselves ends up not pleasing themselves.
Oh, that's the whole thing.
That's
the point. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's all the riches of the human experience come from either interacting with in a positive way other people, helping other people, and you could look at it in a, even the kid discussion, like, is it selfish to have kids? Well, I mean, it's kind of a good, it is, because you benefit. Like,
it's self-interested.
It's self-interest. Yeah. So yeah, I think
they might. So liberals might push back and say, "Well, it's selfish because you're destroying the environment with more children, right?" Or, I mean, they might frame it that way. It's like, at my expense. You're having kids at my expense.
So for those people, if you take that to the extreme, it's like, oh, well, if you support, certain political situations, and why don't you go over and support it locally, like wherever that's happening in the world? And it's the same thing. Like, if you don't want to bring kids in, you don't have to, but you can't control my stuff,
Right. But this blueprint that they have in, confirmation bias is, if people don't do what I do, then they're saying I'm wrong, and I'm not wrong. So they have to push their views onto you.
Which is really annoying. So let's dovetail that into this. I saw a really interesting interview. Do you know who Sean McDowell is?
Don't recognize
Okay,
him.
he's a Christian apologist. He's from Biola University.
Oh, yeah, I think I've seen him.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he interviewed an ex-Satanist, I think just recently, this last week. And it was
that's interesting.
it was a very fascinating conversation. I learned a lot about Satanism that I didn't really know about. One of the things being that there's kind of like two branches, like the supernatural Satanism, those that exist, think that there's an actual entity. and the non-supernatural. So basically atheistic, non-theistic Satanism, where it's just sort of, that's like, he's so, to put it, roughly, he's like a mascot figure to this group, kind of.
Okay.
And so that satanic figure that was set up in Iowa or wherever in the legislature,
in the
I think
state house.
I
Yeah.
think that was a non-theistic, Satan group, whatever.
Okay.
But it struck me as she was describing, and she was a non-theistic, who also dabbled with, in her circles were other people who were not. And anyways, it's a fascinating interview. People should check out. But what struck me though is like, there's not much of a distinction between progressivism and the Satanism that she was describing.
That's funny.
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, like literally, and that dovetails into this conversation.
I'll have to check that out.
You should. But it also dovetails into that discussion of selfishness.
Yeah.
Because to hear her talking about it, get this. The whole Marxist thing is just the Satan thing. Like, in their, circles, Satan was just, the first victim, basically, oppressed by God. Like everything that would apply to any form of Marxist, thinking, it just plays out, but on the supernatural plane in their, thinking. Yeah, it's crazy. You got to see that because once you see it, you can't unsee the parallels between the Satanism and just leftism.
Well, it's funny because conservatism, Christianity, all along that spectrum, the concept is to conquer your selfish desires, right? That's a big part of it. And that's a hard message to rally the troops on.
Yeah.
It's like, make life hard on yourself. Sign up for persecution. It's like, that's tough versus I'll buy you a phone if you vote for me.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's kind of shocking to me sometimes that conservatism has gotten as far as it's gotten, that there's elections are still won, and because the message is really like, not the easy path.
No. And usually what ends up doing it, right, is the economy, right? Like,
yeah.
when it comes down to
It
it,
used to be a bigger deal in the 80s, I would say. So I've observed something in my life, which is, so in the 80s, it was basically capitalism, and they would attack the rich. The left would attack the rich. And there's this big thing, and that was always election, issues. And I think over time, everybody kind of got richer. We got out of the 70s and stagflation, and everybody got richer. And that kind of went away. Mm-hmm. And then they had to find a new issue. The left had to find a new issue to run on, whether, racism or whatever. And so they it's just, like you said it before, it's just about tearing down. Mm-hmm. It's what group am I going to tear down today?
Yeah.
Right, to try and raise ourselves up.
Yeah. Well, even that narrative of like, Satan needed to tear down God, that structure because it wasn't what he wanted, and I have to bring up the L word, like limits, also not accepting whatever limits you find on your situation.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, embracing those very limits is the thing that helps you be you and flourish. That's where the flourishing is, not trying to escape, the whatever it is that makes you in your life, your circumstances, your actual self. You can see this on the transgenderism debate, and now we're going to get censored on YouTube.
Oh no, you use the word.
Yeah, so that is a big part of it. That notion of selfishness, but trying to escape from yourself. There's something on both sides of that.
Yeah. Well, I think in the material world, we're getting close to reaching escape velocity, and
meaning
back to where I was talking before. So, did you see Tesla Optimus robot released a video this week? They keep, there's probably 5 or 6 serious companies that are competing for the humanoid robot, and they keep showing their progress, teasing their progress.
I haven't seen this one.
Okay, so this one is, they have Optimus walk over to a counter, and there's like a conveyor belt of batteries, and he takes batteries and he puts them in containers, and one tips. So traditionally we've had robots that can do this kind of thing. But what those robots are is they're special purpose, they're very expensive, and
Stationary.
and they don't tolerate error, right? So if I made, there's things called Scara robots, which are, they pivot on one axis. So they have this work envelope that's a circle like this chair, right? So it can do this, and it can do this, and it can do this. And so in that case, typically in this situation, that's what you'd make. You'd make an arm that grabs and put the battery and puts it, and it goes, and this is what it does all day. They're expensive to set up. It might be 50 grand, something like that. And it can't tolerate any error. If this container's out of place, the line shuts down. Someone adjusts it and they fix it up. The thing with where we're at with AI and robots, and they just showed this with Optimus, is it doesn't matter where that's at. It understands the concept of, I'm putting this in here. And it had an example where the battery didn't go in and it fell crooked, and it fixed it. Right? Which is like, wild.
Yeah.
That's kind of a breakthrough type of thing. And, we're at the point, I guess this escape velocity concept, we're at the point that Tesla's going to have probably thousands of these actually working next year.
In the factories first, right?
In their factories, right? Yeah. And it probably, and their biggest competitor is one called Figure.
Yeah.
Figure is going to have them in BMW's manufacturing soon.
I didn't know that.
And so, by the way, so this stationary robot that does one thing is 50 grand, maybe 100 grand, somewhere in there, with setup and, development, because it's developed bespoke for that application. Whereas they predict Optimus will be like 20, 25 grand.
Oh, that cheap?
Right.
I knew it was going to be like in the neighborhood of a car.
Yeah, he thinks it'll be cheaper than a car, which it should be, because the bill of materials will be lower, right? Everything in manufacturing. Musk has something, I think he calls it the stupid factor. But the idea is that everything is made of material, right?
Yeah.
And so from a physics standpoint, that should be the limiting cost. If this is made of wood, like the lower the ignorance, the closer you got to the actual cost of this wood, right? If it costs you $1 million to make this mug, well, you're an idiot. You don't know how to do things well. Like, you get this almost down to the cost of the steel, that's low. And so that's the idea with Optimus. It's like Optimus weighs 150 pounds and of steel and wire and you chips and stuff, whereas a car weighs 4,000 pounds. And so ultimately it should be you should be able to do that a lot cheaper. But the point is, it's coming. They're putting thousands in probably within the next 12 months. And after that, then it'll probably be a 10x in 1 year. So it'll be hundreds of thousands, or 100x maybe.
Yeah.
Like,
well, first of all, my first observation is I noticed that you called Optimus he. So that was funny.
Anthropomorphizing.
You
We're
did.
definitely gonna do that.
And also, I love those robots. So I got to go look that up. I show these to everybody when a new one comes out, and my wife's like, how many of these do we have to watch? I heard her say that to somebody when I was showing.
That's funny.
Because it's fascinating. It's like...
It's fascinating, and people just don't get how it's going to change everything. Right?
Yeah.
For better or worse, I'm not saying. I'm just saying it's changing. It's going to change really fast.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a chunk of the workforce. We're beating a dead horse there, but we're going to have a chunk. But the evidence keeps showing that it's coming quickly.
Yes. Yeah. So, okay, you mentioned, I don't know, a while back, I don't know when this was, that you think everyone's going to have a personal robot available for like $100 or $200 a month. Yeah. So I always assumed if this costs like something like a car, that people are just going to like lease it or finance and then own it or something. But probably is it just going to be an ongoing subscription?
I think it'll be various. I mean, if you think of Tesla as the cars as robots right now, which they're pretty close. I don't know if you've been watching the latest release of their full self-driving, but I think they're at 12.3.6. And what happened at version 12, I think we talked about this once, is it went fully neural network.
Yeah.
From the beginning to end. And people are like kind of shocked. People who do like have YouTube channels based strictly on Tesla drivings will be like, wow, I didn't expect such a leap in progression and how good this is. It's like doing things that I would do Like, I don't know how they did that. Like,
Is open source anywhere close? Or
no,
not even close?
no.
Okay.
Tesla, they will have, and they might be signing a deal. They announced they might have a deal with a major car manufacturer to license their AI. For
Interesting.
cars.
He has
But
so many revenue streams. It's ridiculous.
it's crazy. We can go into that. Remind me about Starlink. So the cars are basically robots at this point.
Right.
Most people aren't using them like that. Some of them are using it like that. But it sees, it perceives, it makes a decision, and it does things in the physical world. And if you think that they have several million of them,
Yep.
right? And those are in the field. Those are robots going in the field, and they have you were asking about subscription. You can purchase the cars purchase outright. But
They'll get you for the software.
The software is currently, he's been up and down from $5,000 to $15,000. Currently, it's $8,000 for the full self-driving. We'll just say for the robot.
So you can buy it outright?
You buy
I
it
thought it was like
outright.
$99 a month or something.
They have a $200 a month subscription.
Oh, okay.
So
It's either or.
It's either or, and most things in life are that way.
Yeah.
Right. You can lease or you can buy.
Okay. Now that brings up a really interesting question. I think this has to do partially with why we started the company that we did. So your phone there, my phone, you can buy the phone, but you own the material, right? But you don't own the operating system, like the apps, the hardware, the stuff running on it. So you don't really have any say
I'll
over.
push back. You're an iPhone guy. I'll push back on that. Android, you do own it. Like you can disconnect. It's not licensed.
Okay.
You own it. Android is an open source project. So in fact, I could make my own phone OS from Android right now.
Yeah.
Install it, and you
could, but if you get a Samsung and you're running like Samsung's proprietary version, like there's going to be some agreements that you are,
I'll have to look at that.
Yeah, check it out.
That's interesting.
And I think probably there's truth to both of them. But my overall meta point though is like you buy a robot, and it's going to do all this stuff, and you think that you own it, but is it going to always work the way that you intended for it to work? Or if some regulations hit or something and gets an update over the air while you're sleeping, you know what I mean?
We've talked about this.
And it's hauling you off to jail.
I was just thinking about this in the last day or so. So I don't talk about the robots with most people because it just seems so futuristic and far-fetched that they don't get it. So I talk about AI. Let's talk about the chatbots and so forth. And I was thinking about the way we're interacting with AI. Is getting closer and closer to the way we interact with colleagues at work or friends. Mm-hmm. And if you think about those interactions, there's kind of a privacy component to it. Like you'll share things with friends that you don't want, different levels that you don't want going out. You have, in the workplace, you have proprietary information. You'll talk about business strategy or things, whatever, that you don't want going out. And I think it's going to get more and more important to be aware in your AI whether has the ability, like you said, to go out or to change or, what made you think that way?
Yeah.
Right? Who told you that?
Right.
That's gonna be a deal. And then, going one level further to the robots, like you say, now it can act in the physical world and are you going to kill me?
Yeah. Hearing you say that, I feel like we're probably really early in this space, like because the average consumer is it's not on their radar. So we're sort of planting all these seeds here that are going to be sprouting.
But they will sprout, and it's something to think. I mean, I was teaching a class on AI, and this was to bankers, and it's really important. I have to explain to them, hey, depending on what models you're using, where you're going, your data can be used in training and then leak.
Yeah.
There was an example with Google Gemini. It was Bard at the time, where people's things showed up in a Google search. So it's like their private information that they were putting in there ended up in Google search.
Right.
And so people do need to be aware of that today, I think. And it'll get stronger.
So freedom of speech is important to both of us. What about the right to privacy. Like increasingly since social media came out, like people care less and less and less. You have younger generations. This is just the way things are. Your data is brokered all over the place. You don't even know. And then you have somebody like Klaus Schwab come on the scene and he's like, you're not going to have privacy and you shouldn't care about that anyways, because if you're a good person, you don't have anything to hide. Like
That's funny. I used that in my younger years. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
can you break down your thoughts on that right to privacy or not?
I am no legal expert. I know, I'd like to quickly understand the U.S. position on it. I know Roe v. Wade was decided.
Oh,
on a
yeah,
right,
that was
right to privacy.
right.
It was a convoluted argument.
Yeah.
Let's ask objective reality real quick. The basis in the U.S. for right to privacy legally.
Yeah.
If you have it.
Let's get it on the phone here.
I mean, yeah, I'm approaching it two ways, right? The morality of that and then the legal aspects of that. But yeah, I mean, I think everybody in their life acknowledges that they have a desire to have privacy, right? Don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
It's a big
It's part
deal.
of being a person. You have private thoughts in your head,
Right.
and you can choose to express them or not. Comes out as actions.
I'm going to express these with my wife. There's just different levels
Yeah.
that you're willing to expose.
Okay, so Objective Reality, our AI, which you can check out in the links, it says the basis for privacy rights in the USA is rooted in the Constitution, statutory laws, and court decisions. So there's English common law, influence American law. The Constitution is like the big thing, right? The Ninth Amendment.
It's the Ninth Amendment.
But then some statutory laws, Privacy Act of 74.
Can you tell it to read us the Ninth Amendment?
Yeah.
I'll be curious to know how they encapsulated that. The thing about the rights, I mean, everything that wasn't in the Constitution was supposed to be a right. So yes, we have the right to privacy was the design of the Constitution. But apparently they put an amendment in to codify it. Let's hear what they say.
Yeah. So this says the Ninth Amendment to the United States Constitution states the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people.
That's funny. That's what I would just say it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how I didn't know that it said that.
So-
But that was the intent of the Constitution.
Well, it says that in simpler terms, the amendment means that just because a right is not explicitly listed in the Constitution, it doesn't mean that people don't have that right.
Yeah. That's funny. I wonder when ask Objective Reality when that was added to the Constitution, when the Ninth Amendment was ratified.
Okay.
When was it ratified?
The Ninth Amendment was adopted on December 15, 1791, as part of the Bill of Rights.
Oh, sure.
It was one of the
Bill of Rights
original
is
10
one of the
amendments.
Yeah, okay. So right away they did that. Because that was their intent. It's all you have all the rights. Government doesn't have any of this.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we've veered a little far away. So yeah, right to privacy I think is important and legally so apparently.
Yeah. So we talked about Android, Apple. Apple's made it a big marketing push.
Can we come circle back?
Yeah.
Because I'd like to know your thoughts on this. So Schwab's, and like I said, when I was young, I used to use that. Hey, if you don't have anything to hide,
Yeah.
who cares? How do you feel about that? Why do you care?
Yeah. Well, I think that this is really tied to the freedom of speech, like expression, like thinking. There's not really much of a difference between thinking and expressing it, right? So Michael Knowles really hits this pretty good with his book Speechless. That's actually a worthwhile read.
Okay.
Because if you control the words, you control people's thoughts, basically. And so it's not a one-way street. Like what happens in here just flows out. Also, everything happening out in society, it's going to affect. Like if you this, I think we talked about this. There was somebody who escaped from North Korea.
Oh yeah.
And she's been on I don't know her name.
Great. She's great.
And part of what she said was, in North Korea, we didn't have a word for suffering and misery, or I forget what she said. So how could you be miserable?
No, it was the opposite. It was happiness.
Okay, whatever.
Something like that, right?
Yeah, and that just
Yeah.
proves. So why is it important? Well, because it's basically living.
I get that with speech. I'm thinking privacy, for example. So early on, I was a big advocate. England was one of the first. The UK was one of the first countries that did a whole lot of street cameras for crime.
Oh yeah.
And I remember pushing back on people who were against that. It's like, oh, this is great, right? We're going to cut down a lot of crime, and it's public, anyway. You shouldn't expect privacy on a public street. But now we see, and people like Orwell would have seen it sooner. At least I see. Yeah, okay, China's doing that. They're using it in bad ways. And
Right.
so, but
It's a tool of power and control.
But if you aren't doing something wrong, I'm just curious what your position is.
Oh, well,
Why do you care if
Yeah.
you had a camera in your house looking at you all the
Oh,
time?
sure. Well, a big part of that
Or
is
Alexa was listening.
yeah, which it is all the time, constantly.
Or Siri was listening.
Because a big part of it has to do with morality. We're talking about operating system for a person earlier. Well, what's the operating system that the country's running on that you're participating in, right? And for someone who's a Christian, if that ever becomes outlawed or whatever.
So your desire for privacy is that, hey, I don't want people using, even though it's not bad from a moralistic standpoint, I don't want them using things against me.
Well, I want the freedom to be, and
You can be. There's a camera.
no, but I
looking, so-
can't. If it's controlled, like if I can't actually.
I'm not saying it's controlled. I'm saying people are watching on cameras in your house.
But that is a social pressure. That's a social control of sorts. It's a mechanism of control to conform or not. Because the implication being, right, we have like all these hate speech laws, right? And if they come out and say like, oh, X, Y, or Z, in your text that you go by, whatever your religion is, that's not in fashion anymore. In fact, we've enacted some laws against it. Okay, well, the camera in my house monitoring me reading that and saying it and having a discussion about it, well, then I'm getting hauled off to jail. That's why it's important, because I actually have to be me. Otherwise, I'm just an automaton.
Yeah, no, I get it. And it's a great thing. We should be very appreciative we live in the U.S. with the First Amendment and the Ninth Amendment, apparently, because most countries don't have that. And we see it in Canada. We see it in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you posted something on Facebook, you're going to prison. What? How? That's so, at least for me, that's such a foreign concept. Maybe it's less foreign to younger people today.
Yeah. So why does it matter to you?
Yeah. It's that fallen man will gain power and try to screw you. that's it, right? I mean, we see it happening.
We should make shirts with that.
Yeah.
Like there's a
Fallen
few things.
man will try to screw you. That's my campaign slogan.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
And in the name of like safetyism and stuff, it's for everyone's benefit and good to not have privacy or to not have speech.
Safetyism.
That brings up my wife wanted to make sure that I brought this up. Did you see that Swiss Army knives are going to be losing the knives?
No.
Yeah. I don't know what that's all about, but we're talking about like safetyism,
You know what it's all about? It's all about the countries like the UK that are banning guns, and so they have like serial knife killers and mass stabbings.
And it's
There was talk.
that's some crazy stuff that happens over there.
I think it was Scotland. I don't know if it ever happened, but maybe a year ago they were going to enact a law that you can't have knives. So guns are illegal, and now knives are illegal because people are. I mean, it's like it's like they don't understand. It's the people committing the crimes, not the weapon.
Yeah.
Change it. They'll just change the weapon.
Yeah. This is interesting. So I went to New York. We haven't talked about that in this last week, but
Was it a good time?
Yeah, it was. But we can get into it. But in the Uber ride on the way back, I got this nice talkative guy. We were kind of talking about stuff, and as we're going through Brooklyn, the discussion turned to guns, and I was like, "Well, is it illegal to have a firearm just in New York City, or is it like a statewide thing?" He said, "No, we can't have them." And I said, that's weird because where I'm from, like there's constitutional carry. Like you just carry it wherever.
Carry.
And it was like amazing. Like he was like, seriously? I don't think we could have that, man. Everyone would be blasting each other. But I was like, but that's not actually what happens, like here. Gang stuff, that's like one thing, right? In the inner city. Okay. But he was like amazed that anyone can just go if you're not a criminal and like get a gun and.
And it seems to have, I'll have to go back and look at statistics, but I used to live in Texas, and I mean, crime was much lower because people were afraid of getting shot.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not gonna go mug this person because there's a very good chance they have a gun and they'll shoot me.
Yeah.
right? So it's definitely deterrent. So Chris is has to be a little secretive about this, I think. But yeah, major involved with major technology company and had a special trip to New York to look at new technology.
Yep.
So the trip was productive.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting, just like it'd been a while since I'd been to New York anyways. This was in Tribeca. So World Trade Center was like right there. And it was good to get in and like see New York life because it really wasn't like on the news, it was a little different. Of course, that's a nice area, so you're not gonna. It's not like experiencing all of New York City. But yeah, and the event was interesting itself. It took place in this old penthouse. It was nondescript, so you would never know that this tech company, owns it and has it. But it was cool. It was real interesting, and a lot of it was just like meeting interesting people, everywhere.
Yeah, all walks of life.
Yeah, it's just like it was weird. I came out of the hotel. There isn't a cheap hotel, there, so it was a nice hotel. And I turned around the corner, and I'm walking next to this other guy. And we turned the corner, and there was a homeless guy there camped out under this nice building. And I expected this guy to be going wherever he was going in front of me and just walk right on past. And I was going where I was going, which is like another half block down. And I noticed that he stopped, and he was talking to this guy. And I think he did give him $1 or something. I forget what he did. But he said, "Oh, there you are. I knew I'd find you here." And they just struck up a conversation. This young dude, I don't know where he was headed, but I was really shocked because when I came back, I was walking back, and they were still having a conversation like a while later, and I thought that was like kind of a touching moment. It was like, I mean, I never see somebody do something like that, and just stop and engage with this human, and how's your day going type of.
I think, did I tell you the story with my sister-in-law, who was kind of not apolitical, independent person, and I pick her up from the airport one day, driving her about 40 minutes back to our place so she can be with her sister. And she's asking me about where I've lived, and this is early on. And I mentioned San Francisco. She's like, "Oh, how'd you like San Francisco?" I'm like, it's really beautiful, amazing culture. It's probably the prettiest city, most character of any city. But I said the homeless problem is really rough, and they're just everywhere. And I described some of the situations. And I'm like, like this guy, not too far from my office, I'd take him lunch every day and try to talk to him, and not every day, but some days. And she stopped and she's like, "Well, you're conservative, or you're Republican." She said, "You're a Republican." I'm like, "Yeah."
You're not allowed to do that.
Yeah. Well, you don't care about people. You don't do that. I'm like, what? and it was the first time that it hit me that the left had painted conservatives as non-empathetic, cold, callous people.
Yeah.
Rather than it's like, what I believe they are. It's like, hey, we want to lift all boats. We think the best way to do it is not to tear everybody down. And it was really an interesting moment for me. Now, recently, my son he did some volunteer work in Denver with the homeless. And he's like, it was all drugs. Like every single person on the street was about drugs. And so he's like, so it's pretty hard it's like, what do you do there?
Well, Michael Schellenberger really goes into that.
Yeah.
That's one of his things. He's investigated that, and
is he the one who like lived with him?
Well, I don't know, but it's been one of his things that he's really cared about for a long time.
Yeah.
And that's basically, he said that here's the two causes, and one of them is the drugs, and
one of them's mental issues.
Yeah, maybe, but he's like, it's not what everyone thinks it is.
Yeah.
And therefore the solutions that you think would apply and work, they don't work, and we're putting all this money. That's a whole different thing.
I think there are. I have an uncle who works in a homeless shelter, and there are situations I think people, get trapped in.
Yeah.
But I think it's like a very small minority. That's my understanding, is it's a really small minority. And so all we do is we think that it's just a money thing. If we just give them a job, if we just do this, and it's not that. The majority is not that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably true. So anyways, I mean, it was cool.
Yeah.
There's something about New York, in any big city that there's something cool about it,
Yeah.
the big buildings, and it's not just the tall ones. I mean, and it's a lot of it comes from the old buildings. Those are cool. There's a lot of character. It hasn't just been glassed
The
over.
brownstone buildings are,
Yeah.
So I lived in New York for 6 years, and I was always afraid. So this is pre-Giuliani, so this is late '80s, and it was so bad. Two stories I'll tell you.
Where? What was the area you were in?
So I was in upstate, but I was
Okay.
down in the city a lot.
Oh, okay.
And the crime was so bad that I was always paranoid, and I'm coming back to the fact that this is days when cars broke down constantly, right? And I was always concerned that my car was going to break down, because what happens if you're a college student and you can't afford a tow truck immediately and this kind of thing, you have to leave your car. And so this was always at night if I was driving through at night. You have to leave your car, and when you come back, it's stripped.
Gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those days they wouldn't steal them. I don't know if they didn't have chop houses or whatever, but they jack it up, take all the tires, they take out everything was gone off it, and you come back to this like frame.
Yeah.
And so I was always afraid of that. So an example of crime was much worse then. And there's one time I'm walking through. So 3 stories. I was mugged in New York City, which was a really interesting experience for a young farm town guy. So that's one story. But another time I'm walking with a friend who's also from my farm town, my high school, and they're shooting. And I'm like, look ahead, keep walking. And it was a different, and so we do think it's so bad now, but it's not as bad as it used to be. The statistics, you can look that up.
Yeah.
It's not as bad as it used to be.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the metrics, right? Because I was talking to the Uber guy. I said, didn't they just enact something where you get like charged if you go in a certain zone now in Manhattan? And he was like, yeah.
If you go in a zone?
Yeah, like if you go into downtown or wherever, like if you go into a certain zone where everyone goes, there's like an extra tax now daily.
Oh, charged, not like criminally charged.
Because I don't know, I'm thinking,
financially charged.
do people, do people like this stuff? I hear about it on the news. I'm like, I wouldn't like that, but I'm going to see what the New Yorkers think,
Yeah.
And he's like, do you think I like that? No, I don't like that. He was like pretty heated because that's his job is to go into that zone all the time.
I see. So
And
he has to pay an extra tax or whatever.
yeah, and then he was telling me all this other stuff that he didn't like, different taxes for things. And so apparently not everyone is super happy with the job that New York is doing running things there.
No. In fact, a few weeks ago, I was in New York and visiting a buddy from 20, 30 years ago. And he's on the left side of the spectrum. He's involved in academia and so forth. And I'm like, we're talking. He's like, yeah, probably moving to North Carolina. He's multi-generational family from that area. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. I would never picture you moving. He's like, yeah, the state's pretty bad. It's very unbusiness friendly. It's probably the most corrupt state in the country. And this recognition, even by the left, that they get so far, so bad. But it's funny because the recognition usually doesn't extend to the fact of the party got us here. Right. This type of governance is what it is.
Yeah.
It's typically the fault is laid at companies. Well, the companies lobby the government.
Yeah.
And,
You know how we were talking about last time how you think it's going to be a while, if ever, like before the U.S. like crashes because it has all this momentum. Like even though empires go 200 years and whatever, all these different stats, I feel like that was kind of New York, like the city. It has a lot of momentum.
It's true.
Because there's some cool stuff there.
Yeah.
But it also has a lot pulling it down,
Yeah.
But it's going to take a while.
Yeah. And that's what happens is they can tax and they can pull for a long time the big and they do this to big companies. When Microsoft was on the ascent in the 90s, they got to a certain size and there they go, they start pulling. The EU started pulling on them for fine. You need to give us a few $1 billion. And the U.S. government antitrust kicked in, and they're like, you're running a monopoly. And they just start pulling now. Same thing. Microsoft's so big and successful.
Yeah.
Just kept going with the momentum. But, yeah, it's a tendency. It's those is it the crabs who pull each other down from the bucket? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, not to switch subjects, but I did want to get your take on this. So there's a new iPad release, and part of that was an ad that came out. And I don't know if you saw this. You saw it.
The press, the hydraulic press.
Okay, so Apple apologized for the ad.
Now, they apologized because,
It upset people.
enlighten the viewers.
Okay.
They have a piano, and go ahead.
So I think what probably someone was trying to do was capitalize on the hydraulic press YouTube phenomenon where things get crushed and they think it's satisfying, like, so there was probably that, but also for everyone saying like, this was so creative. Somebody else did a very similar ad for a phone a while back, and I have it bookmarked somewhere. So it wasn't a totally brand new concept, which is a little even disappointing because the people out there are like, this was so creative. Well, actually, yeah, except it's coming in from the sides and crushing all this same stuff basically into a phone.
Yeah.
But so Apple, part of, I think, okay, there was a press and it was compressing
a giant press, like 20, 50
a warehouse.
wide.
A warehouse, yeah. And it's very bleak looking. That was part of it, was the color options, the grading, but it looks very dystopian. But it's compressing a piano, a trumpet, guitar, record player,
paint,
a bust of, I don't know, a philosopher or something. Yeah. And so it's compressing it all, and it gets down to the bottom, and it turns out, it's all been compressed into an iPad.
Right.
Which I get the metaphor. That's clever. It is. Yeah. But I think what bothered some people was that, you have all this real stuff, the analog stuff getting destroyed. And it's actually, everyone was saying I don't care what side of the thing you're on. Like, it's actually a very accurate ad, I would say, in what it's saying.
We're destroying reality and making it digital.
Yeah, everything's becoming digitized.
So that's wild. I saw it and I didn't find it objectionable at all.
Okay. And that's why I wanted your take on this, because I know you're a techno optimist and you like it, and I think I can see both sides.
If that was like puppies and kittens, it'd be pretty traumatizing. But it was like old stuff.
You could do that though. You could do the same thing, and it would be gruesome, so you wouldn't do it.
Right.
Put anything that you care about, whoever you are, into the thing, because it's all digitized. And like puppies and kittens, those are in games. Like we look at cat videos and stuff. That's the same thing. It's all getting compressed into the digital realm.
Were they unhappy about the metaphor, or they're unhappy that they were physically wasting some?
I think one angle is that like the people in Japan were like extra disturbed by it. And I think it was just like a cultural thing. I was reading through some of the comments, and they said, we respect, items and objects in history, and it was very off-putting to that group. And yeah, I think probably a lot of it falls on political lines. Hey, this represents everything new, and you're killing everything old. Like, so I think there was that distinction. But a lot of it, I saw somebody had an interesting take. They were saying this is sort of a juxtaposition against Apple's famous 1984 ad, where everything starts out bleak, and then they come in and she swings the hammer at Big Brother, and you go from totalitarian to the more free and open thing, and it's colorful then. Right. And this is like the opposite. Everything was really bleak, and it's compressing all the color and everything. The paint's like splattering out, and it stays like dystopian kind of in the when you put something on film, you're making choices, So someone who does some camera stuff, like the grading there, it was cinematic, the color options, but it wasn't like happy either. Mm-hmm. And so somebody made the decision to give it kind of a bleak feel. Like it was bleak lighting in this unfeeling warehouse, if you want to get into the emotions of what was presented. So yeah, I don't know. So
I immediately think of the business angle. It's probably, even though they apologize, they're probably psyched.
Yeah.
And they got a lot of viral views of...
Definitely.
This is what people don't get with Trump. Trump, and they think he's just an idiot, which is just so wrong. Yeah, I've been watching him since the 80s. He works the press. So he'll say something stupid or put some obvious misspelling in there so that they all ridicule him and then promote that message billions of times. Mm-hmm. And his point is, my message got out because besides that word, here was my point.
That's right.
So he got the viewership of billions for free, and they do that, and they can't stop themselves.
Yeah,
it's like an affliction. They can't. They don't either. They're too ignorant to understand that that's happening, which is to his credit. Then that's amazing.
Yeah.
But he's been doing stuff like this. Like he had a fake persona where he would call newspapers and talk about Trump. Right? I can't remember. It was like a PR guy. He had this PR guy working for him, and I mean he just knows how to use the media effectively. And sometimes I wonder with an ad like Apple like that, if there was some discussion, they're like, well, that'd be great, right? If we get a lot of pushback,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was.
I'd like to really know that. I mean, I speculate, but
Well, I'm sure that they are ultimately happy with all the attention.
yeah.
Yeah,
I wonder
everyone.
if they anticipate if they would have cut it or not.
I don't know. I feel like Apple says what it wants to say, and often subtly. Especially with environmental issues, let's say, like they're not shy about it. So I doubt it.
Their Mother Nature ad. Do you remember
Yeah,
the Mother Nature
yeah,
ad?
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they're probably happy about it because now, regardless of what the ad content was, people know there's a new iPad out, right? So
Yeah.
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 So that was interesting. Let me get your take though on this. The departure flight, it's just a smaller airport, heading out. But and I love the small airports.
I'm just gonna say I love small.
You
airports.
cruise through, and it's like
it's yeah.
I don't even think there was one person in the security line ahead of me.
Wow.
That was awesome. But on the way back, so a very standard. In fact, all I was asked for, I got up and the TSA lady was like, I started getting out, my thing to scan or whatever. She's like, just your ID. Like they don't. It's like it's so laid back.
Yeah.
But in New York, though, they were scanning everybody's face. I don't know if you had that when you were there.
Interesting. No.
Yeah, step in front. There's a camera, and I remember seeing a news segment about that. And at the time, I was thinking, well, that's not cool because I don't really want to be
privacy.
Yeah. So, what's your
to
take
privacy.
on airport security and the face scanning?
Yeah, I got some opinions on that.
Yeah, tell me about it.
So, 9/11 happens, right? And they shut down the airport for days. And I had people visiting. I'm in the middle of building my log home in Virginia, and I have people visiting, and they can't leave because the airports are shut down for a few days. And after that, TSA starts. TSA when it started was still is, but it was a worse nightmare than it is now. It was ridiculous. The lines you could be an hour. It was insane.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened is, I think it might have been Delta stepped up and is like, hey, government, we're going to give you all of our employees to teach you how you do this kind of stuff. Right? So the private market has to step in and help them. And now it runs a little more efficiently. But I do this all the time when I'm traveling. I calculate how many man hours are lost in TSA, and it's like billions of dollars, right? And you do this math backwards, and we have bean counters, actuary tables that say a human life is worth, $10 million roughly. Depends on what country, where you're at, and so forth. But it turns out that they have to be saving like 10,000 people a year from death for this to be paying for itself.
That doesn't seem very
yeah
smart.
It's really stupid. And in my mind's eye, I can picture the marketplace solving it like that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if you're afraid of terrorism, you fly the non-terrorist airline who charges an extra premium and does extra security, right? But because like private jets, you don't go through TSA. You have a little separate airport.
Yeah.
Your chauffeur takes you to that little airport, and you get on your plane. You walk onto your plane.
That's right.
There's no TSA, and so it's like, the market could solve this. If this has value to people, the market would solve it like that. Instead, the government comes in with their club, pulls the country down. Like we were talking about New York, we can ride on our laurels and coast.
Yeah.
We can afford that extra unproductivity.
Yeah. So you don't view like Clear, the pre-check, as a market.
That's a market tool, but it's a good piece. It's like, it's like companies trying to work within the Defense Department.
Yeah.
Like the basic formula is bad. We can still do some good things private. SpaceX can definitely help NASA. Yeah. But they need to they shouldn't be involved in that.
Okay, so it's not really the scanning of the face that bothers you. You kind of just don't like the whole
picture.
shebang.
I mean, the scan of the face, definitely. I haven't experienced that, but that bothers me because now they have me on record and they know where I'm going. And maybe I don't want anybody to know I was in New York.
Yeah, but I suppose they probably know that just off your your email, they could scan that, your plane ticket.
Your triangulation of your cell phone.
And also like there's probably cameras all over the airport too, so like they don't actually need one right here to like know that you're there and where you're going, you know, like but it's in principle though.
And I think we do have to. I'm involved with a company that's pretty like hypocritical here, but I own a company that that records public places, right? And it's to improve business process, this kind of thing. I think we do have to accept in public, public places that you can be recorded. I'm taking a video of the park. Tough. You're in the park. And the courts have ruled. I've done a lot of research on this. They call it reasonable expectation of privacy.
Yeah.
And you can be recorded in places that you shouldn't have any reasonable expectation of privacy. So if I'm on a street, I'm recording, I'm in my front yard, you thought people could see you on the street. If you're in your bedroom, you expect that people can't see you.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way our laws come down on it.
Yeah. But see, I feel like we're back to trust. Knowing you, I would trust your business and the way that you would implement something like that. But I think there's lots of other businesses or like the government where I wouldn't have the same level of trust.
And that's true, and that's a problem. Yeah, it's a little different. A CNN journalist capturing me on camera in the park versus the FISA court being able to pull up all of my phone, anything on me, and nail me without due process.
Yeah.
Right. And speaking of which, I just guess it was a few weeks ago they reauthorized that. That drives me utterly crazy.
With some extra
with 100
stuff.
Was that the one with they tacked on the $100 billion Ukraine and Israel funding? They tacked that on to a bill.
If it wasn't, I mean,
they just snuck it in there. But the FISA thing drives me crazy because like we watched it. At this point, everybody understands that they lied to the courts to get warrants to tap a political opponent, Trump.
Yeah.
To go through his records and his phones and so forth. And it was like 400,000 times they did this.
Yeah.
Illegally. 400,000 illegal requests on the FISA. And Republicans got on, everybody, not all Republicans, but a lot of Republicans got on every single Democrat.
This is why people talk about the uniparty.
Uniparty.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. It's tragic. It's not going to be a uniparty this time. Kennedy is getting, he's going to shake things up a little bit. He'll get his 5 to 10% this time. It's
weird because nobody if somebody who's like really a Democrat and somebody who's really a Republican, neither of those like him. So it's like, and it's hard to tell who he's going to pull the most votes from.
Oh, I don't think it's. I don't think it's hard. I think it's going to be Democrats. I've talked to a lot of Democrats.
I don't know
who like him and would consider him, and I like him. I like his. I think he's an honest man.
It's hard to wholesale like him or wholesale dislike him.
I don't. I mean, he came out for full-term abortion just a couple days ago.
It's crazy.
Full-term.
Because then what's the difference 1 second later and it's just a living thing?
Well, you remember Northup, Governor Northup? He got caught on audio. They were having some kind of discussion. And they're like, well, what if the baby's born? Yeah. He's like, well, we'd keep him warm and safe while we had the discussion of what to do.
Yeah.
It's like,
oh, wow. No.
He survived that.
Wow.
He survived that. It's like, there was a lot of outrage over that for like 36 hours. And then he went on.
Yeah.
It's like, he was literally talking about keeping a baby warm.
Wow.
While we decide whether we're going to kill it.
Yeah, that's crazy. So yeah, Kennedy was the full term. He made those comments.
Full term. Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with pretty much most of his positions, but he's an old guard Democrat like we used to have, who isn't about destroying society. He's one of these kind of I think he honestly believes I want to help people, and this is how my father, my uncle taught me you're going to help people.
Yeah,
and I think it's wrong.
Someone floated that he should be Trump's running mate.
Yeah. I wouldn't go there.
Someone else said.
Because he's now totally going to get assassanated. By the left,
oh,
right?
man.
Right?
That's not funny.
I mean, yeah. I mean, you need someone in there. I think, I don't know who it was. Someone was talking about he needs an assassination-proof VP.
I saw that.
Yeah.
And there's only like 2 options.
Like Vivek.
Yeah.
And?
I forget who the other one was.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
because you don't want someone crazy or
Right.
yeah, taking the reins.
No, that's absolutely what he needs to do.
Political strategy is kind of funny.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the yeah. So tell me what's next on your list. Yeah. Anything
Well,
else?
I wanted to come back to you were talking about the private jets. Have you ever done like net jets or something like that?
No.
Oh, you haven't. Well, I was going to say, what's your thought on that? Because it's basically like
Yeah.
it's not purely private ownership.
It's expensive.
Yeah, it's still expensive.
I've looked into it.
Okay.
I haven't done it. But
Do you just not
I've
travel
looked into it.
enough
I don't travel
to
enough
make it worth it?
You have to travel a lot. Your time has to be worth, thousands of dollars per hour.
Yeah, because for people who don't
pay
know,
for
it's
this.
like fractional ownership
Fractional
of a
jet
private
ownership,
jet. Yeah,
right. It's time sharing.
and there's a couple
time
different
sharing jet. Yeah,
companies, not
links
just
and-
Buffett's.
Yeah. It's, I'm hoping that personal drones, there's a couple companies, Ewang, I think is one of them, if you want to look it up.
I know who that is.
Personal
Yeah.
drones are hopefully coming. And I think there's a company that's actually in business planning to do a small jet. So the personal drones don't have a lot of range right now, right? They're short because they use a lot of power. They're not
Right.
efficient like wings and electric motors and so forth. But there's one company, I think they're going to use Ewang. Ewang's in play in Dubai already, but they're going to use it in LA to hop over the city.
It's like a giant quadcopter, if I know what you're talking about.
Basically a quad, yeah. Basically
Yeah.
a drone, but
Yeah.
you can carry a person.
It sounds like you're all about it.
I'm excited about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that'll be fun. That's a good jump.
Is it a one-seater right now?
It's a one-seater.
Okay.
And we need this kind of outside the box thinking. We have, about the L.A. San Francisco high-speed rail project. You know about that?
You mean that they spent all the money on and it built like less than a mile or something?
Yeah. So they built. This is interesting stat. I think they've spent $8 billion or $10 billion, somewhere in that range, maybe eight, and they've done 1,600 feet.
Oh,
Which is like
wow.
less, what is that,
if there was ever an
of a
example
mile.
of bad government spending.
The Manhattan Project in inflation-adjusted dollars cost $7 billion.
Yeah.
So the entire multi-year building the nuclear bomb with the best scientists from all over the world.
And to put it further to shame, China used to have no high-speed trains, and now they're everywhere over there.
Yeah, I saw that was interesting. I saw an interesting progression how quickly they laid infrastructure in the whole country. Mm-hmm. And you can do that, but inefficient use of capital. Here's the idea, right? Inefficient use of capital, and they'll pay the price. This is the problem with lack of free markets.
Yeah.
And there go cities, their real estate's same thing. Very inefficient. Now they're in distress, and it might potentially collapse the economy.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
That's why you can't do it. It looks good temporarily.
Yeah.
It was fun while, the deficit spending worked.
Have you ever seen over there, like a lot of Chinese people, from my understanding, they invest in these secondary apartments because there's all these apartment buildings, but they're like ghost apartments. Like no one lives there.
Yeah.
They're all torn down. Have you read about this a little
I
bit?
think I did.
Yeah, because like
almost
they don't
like
have anywhere else to park their money.
It's like a tulip bubble.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they buy
when
these.
when that collapses, it's
Yeah.
not, we talk
Yeah.
about that with the stock market. People see a stock market bubble and they go, "Oh, only the rich people are getting screwed here." Yeah, no, it's like the teacher's retirement fund is in there. So
Yeah.
same with China. These people are in the real estate market.
Right.
Like your everyday dude is in the real estate market.
Yeah.
and it's collapsing.
Yeah, that's weird. So we're back to sometimes it seems like China's eating America's lunch. It'd be nice to have America like back on the scene. In some ways, there are some private sectors in America that were just like at the forefront still. And I saw somebody talking about America's at most like 6 months ahead in any particular sector, due to like IP theft and
Yeah,
it's kind of a bleak picture. But you realize like how interdependent we all still are, the two countries on each other. And it's like, if China's going to make a move on Taiwan, for instance, or, what really could either do to the other really without just blowing the whole planet apart, because
economically.
yeah.
There's an old saying that where the money doesn't flow, the tanks flow. Right? So if you don't have trade, then you end up going to war. If you have trade, you're dependent on each other, and you end up not fighting.
Right, which theoretically is what politics is all about, because it's war by another means.
Yeah.
So you're like Sun Tzuing, the other team into oblivion, kind of.
There's an interesting geostrategist named Peter Zion. I don't know if
Not
you've run
familiar.
into him. He used to work for Stratford, which is a great global geostrategist kind of consulting firm. He's out on his own now, but he spends a lot of time. If you haven't seen him, you should look him up. He spends a lot of time talking about the demographic curves of the countries. Basically, point being the whole world's screwed because we aren't making enough kids.
Is that another T-shirt?
Yeah, the whole world's screwed.
This is a recurring theme here.
Yeah, screw is on all my T-shirts. But yeah, the whole world's in trouble because we aren't making enough kids.
Yeah.
And then your economy falls apart. And he talks about China's, he says, is like within the next 5-10 years, it's over. Like they're done. They cannot, they're trying to pay people to have babies, not working. They can't do it.
But this is interesting. I saw somebody was like had a tour of a robot factory. We're talking about robots. Did you see it? With the lifelike, they look like Chinese.
Yeah.
And one of them had like 6 arms, you know.
Yeah.
Are they hoping to replace with technology? I know that was floating around in Japan a little bit. Or Musk brought this up just as the other side. You know, a certain side of the aisle wants to import people from other countries to make up for the lack of the birth rate. But that doesn't really solve anything either. So
well, it definitely changes a lot of things. I mean, not solve things, but it. So UK just had a study that, shocker here, be prepared. Mass migration is not helping their economy. So what it turns out, you know, if you don't have wise immigration policy, like a lot of countries like Canada, although they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot in other ways, but a lot of countries have like a merit system in immigration. So, for example, if I want to become a Canadian citizen, and I'm a guy who owns property there and I spend time there, if I want to become a Canadian citizen, there's a couple channels to do it. It's like I have to buy a company, I have to invest a certain amount of money, I have to be a doctor, I have to be something that's going to benefit their society. I get points, I have to know English or French. And they have this. This is how they work it. It's like you're going to be a benefit to our economy and our system rather than a draw on it. Then there's countries like the U.S. that it's a lottery or it's just an open border. And the analysis on that, and I think I haven't dug into the UK analysis, is those people are, a good chunk of them are on public subsidies, welfare, the education of their kids. They're bigger draw than they are benefit.
Yeah.
So that's
yeah. You were talking about the left like painting things in a rosy way, but you can have a slogan, but it doesn't mean that it's like true, So if you say like, well, diversity is our strength, and to be fair, we aren't unfeeling Republicans like someone might like paint it. Like we care about people, but there's different ways of caring. And so, if diversity is a strength, okay, you talked about you like having like good Thai food. It's like a block over and you can get access to that. That's cool. Like, but there's a way to go about things.
Well, and there's a limit.
There's a limit. So now when you bring,
otherwise your country becomes another country.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem, in my mind, again, I'm pro melting pot and immigration, but in a measured way. It's like, if I wanted to live in Mexico, I'd move to Mexico, right? Or if I wanted to live in Afghanistan, I'd live in Afghanistan. But I'm a Western proponent, and I appreciate everything that the West has done for not only the West, but the world, really.
Yeah,
We've helped the entire world.
Yeah.
And our value system and our work ethic and the things we do shaped and promoted that. If you dilute that, or you eliminate it.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's why you left your country, because it was so bad.
Yeah.
Why would you want to come in? I see that on a small scale with California all moving to Texas and Montana and Colorado and ruining the states. I mean, they're doing the same thing they did to California. They're doing that to the states. And it's like, well, that bothers me.
Yeah. So, you said, well, there's a limit to the immigration. Okay. Yeah. That's an established fact. Like Musk talks about that a lot. Like, hey, we're this percentage of the population on Earth here in America, and even if you just brought in 4% more, like it overruns everything. Like, okay, so there is a limit. No one would disagree with that, even if they don't want to talk about it. So you have to think there are smart people running things. Now, it doesn't matter, they may not be on the same wavelength as me, but there's clearly some people who are smart and plan things. So what's the purpose then? You have to ask if there is a limit. And we've talked about before, the saying that the purpose of a system is what it does.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that makes you think, why?
It's there. There's two levels, I think, probably a blend in there between. But I think, as usual, you have upper echelon, powerful, controlling people who are doing it for selfish reasons.
Yeah.
Right? Power, votes, bribery, money.
Right.
And did we talk about the San Salvador president last week?
Is that Bukele?
Yeah.
I think we did. Pulling everyone in.
Just love it. I keep thinking about it. It's just like,
yeah.
That's so great. So this week he arrested some people.
Oh, really?
People were arrested.
That was fast.
Yeah.
I wonder if that investigation had been going on already and he was just sort of announcing it at that point.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Know. I don't know the answer to that. But I'm sorry, I lost your last question.
Well, I think we basically had covered, most of that. I was going to ask you this though, so you do more travel than I do, and you have done
not anymore,
over the years.
but maybe over the years.
Yeah, but what are your travel hacks? Like, do you have some things that, like, when you're going,
Pack lightly.
Is that?
I can tell you, after years now of traveling with my wife, it's like I had kind of perfected the art. So at one point, I had a business partner in France, and I was traveling to France like on a very frequent basis. And this is where I got the taste of first class, which is don't get the taste, because then if you ever go back to coach, you're screwed.
Were we
If you ever
recording
go
already?
back to coach, you're screwed.
Were we recording, or was it before we started, where you were telling me everyone should fly when they're young, first class?
Yeah.
Break that down,
Yeah,
and then we'll get back.
So there's an interesting thing. I read something by some consultant or some person years ago, saying when you're young, even though you can't afford it, you should fly first class because of the networking that you get out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Right, the people flying first class are usually like executive suite type of people. And there's a lot of stories that come out of that I think are interesting.
That's actually pretty smart when you think about it like that, because those people, even people in their offices, probably in their organizations, would get an hour and a half or 3 hours with them one-on-one.
Never.
Yeah.
Never.
That's quite an opportunity.
Yeah. I think it's a smart thing. I didn't ever do it, but so don't end up. Where I was going with that. So yeah, travel light, because that just makes everything so much more pleasant, right?
Yeah.
Baggage check-in, everything just is so. So that's the biggest travel hack. Secondly, is try to fly in and out, like you mentioned, at smaller airports. So you're in the Virginia area, go into Richmond instead of National, because it's you're parking 100 feet from the door.
Yeah.
There's no lines. Your walk through the airport.
Don't have to show up 2 hours early.
Yeah, everything so much. So that's one. I don't know. I'm trying to think if I would have.
Do
others.
you fly first class usually, or no?
No.
Yeah, because you like to.
I haven't done that for years.
Yeah, not worth it, or. What's your take on first class?
Yeah, I think not worth it. Probably just an economic thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't feel good spending it on that.
But it's pretty alluring, Mm-hmm. When I was doing it, they bring your stuff comes on like china and glasses and hot towels. And how about yourself?
I very rarely fly first class. Sometimes my travel agent is my wife, and sometimes she'll upgrade me or something if she feels like it's worth it, so that's cool. But very rarely. But you know what? I do hate it. Like you're getting on and you're like section 10, like back by the back bathroom or something. And you walk by, and it's looking nice.
It's looking nice. And I don't know, my son had an interesting proposition, which is, we've talked about this a lot. It's like a lot of the ills of society come from comparing. It's like,
and being too pampered.
Well, there's another set of ills, but you should be totally satisfied with your house or your apartment because it's so much better than it used to be, but no, you're comparing up.
That's right.
You and I talked about, I didn't want to drive. I had a car that was really flashy, and I didn't want to drive that car. I also feel that way about my son's statement was, hey, in a pew, everyone's equal. And you shouldn't have, that's a good thing, right? Everybody's equal under God.
Yes.
And I think that's a cool thing. You walk on that airplane and it's obvious right out of the gate that not everybody's equal.
Yeah.
And I think that promotes pride in the people in first class. I think it promotes discontent with the people who aren't. I mean, I think probably generally I'm totally free market, and if that's the way it works, I'm going to take that vote.
Yeah.
But I think from a self-control, from a, the
Yeah.
way you conduct yourself, don't flaunt your wealth.
Yeah. Or it's like I heard Joe Rogan was talking about. Did you ever get tempted by the cold plunge thing that everyone was doing? Okay, because the reason that he brought that up was like, hey, the first thing I do in the morning is cold plunge, and the reason is because I did a really hard thing, and then everything seems like easier. You
That's
know,
funny.
but that's a matter of self control, like And I don't know if he sticks to that or not. And he probably like saunas later, to make up for it.
My son
But
takes cold showers.
yeah, you can do that.
That's brutal.
That's right.
Thomas Jefferson would wake up and put his feet in a bucket of ice.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I found that out touring Monticello years ago. I'm like, and TJ's the man.
Cold plunge of back
Thomas
then.
Jefferson had it together.
Yeah.
But like Benjamin Franklin, these were some wickedly good, decently smart and multi-talented people.
Yeah.
So when I heard he put his feet in ice every morning, I thought there must be something to that. And
Were you doing that?
I didn't. No, I never did it. But I thought, it might be worth exploring.
Yeah. It's funny how people have the same kind of concept over the years, but it just manifests differently. But I do want to say, like if I had a certain sort of project going on, I would book a first class for that. Like editing, I edited some video footage like on the way back, and luckily no one in front of me was like shoving their seat back, but for certain times, like there is something about having a little more space and legroom, and like
I mean it's kind of like the net jets and fractional jet ownership. If your time, there's some value of your time that I would like to. It would be, I don't know if you've seen the basically like cabins on Singapore Airlines business class where it's like a bed and a room. And
right.
And it's like, it seems if I was doing, Asia or Australia.
You kind of need that though. If you're going, you don't want to be, I saw, man, did you see this concept? I don't know who was trying to save money, which airline, this concept was for. But it was like just basically like hanging swings almost that
the standing
you barely
seats, the standing seats.
Oh man, that would be awful.
Yeah.
I guess you still get from A to Z, but wow.
I knew a guy who came up with the concept, and here you go. Here's a business idea for anyone. It's people show up at the airport, you give them tranquilizer, they're out, you just stack them in.
Oh man,
500 people on a plane, and they get there and they wake up.
Could you trust someone once you're tranked to not like rob you or do something worse? Like that's funny and that's kind of brilliant, but also that's really creepy.
And I would never do it.
That's like that space movie, like where you put them in cryo and you wake up
Passengers. Did you see Passengers with?
I think was that Pratt. Yeah,
and,
I kind of forget though. What was it? He woke her up and he shouldn't have. Is that what it was?
That was it.
Oh, okay.
That was it.
Yeah.
He fell in love with the girl in the pod and basically ruined her life.
Yeah.
Selfishness.
That's funny. Yeah. So anyways, I do think, is it worth it? Sometimes. And so maybe that's part of it. Like, but you don't want to baby yourself. We talk about the world getting infantilized. I think the second you just baby yourself all the time, like then that's it. Like you're on your own decline of your personal empire then.
Yeah. I think I told you coming back from our, forested woods place in Canada, there's something good about not constantly having everything you want.
Yeah.
As cushy.
Yeah.
Convenient.
But that it's cool when it's a choice. And because you know that you can come back. So it's actually like a way of having some balance.
Yeah.
Like Carlson was talking about, he's got his cabin or wherever where he fishes. Did you hear this?
I don't remember that.
Yeah. And he has like no power, no electricity. He said he used candles.
Yeah.
And I also assume that he has like a really nice place like elsewhere too, so it's not like how he's living.
Right.
But that's
it's a retreat.
Yeah.
refresh, sharpen the saw, as they say.
Right.
I think self-deprivation of certain things. I found it interesting. I just kind of discovered in the last few months. Tucker Carlson does not he doesn't own or watch TVs. I mean, like, that's his whole profession.
Yeah.
Doesn't do it. Doesn't go back and look at his own video. Doesn't use social media himself. It's like he's unplugged, which is really reminiscent of my wife. My wife kind of got me down that path. She had a company, and she started a company, pretty successful, and she would not take a computer and would not take a email. No, just totally disconnected. And in fact, people would bring a report. She'd look at it and then drop it in the trash. She was like totally unencumbered. There was nothing. And
Wow.
I think that's interesting. And to find Tucker Carlson was doing that. And so she pushed really hard in our younger years not to have our kids, no TV, right? No video games, no technology. And I ended up pushing, they got to have the internet, right? That's education today. They've got to know how to use it. And both my kids, it's interesting, both think that they wish they had less. They're very like academically successful, adjusted people.
Yeah.
But they say they would. And I'm like, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, but you wouldn't be where you're at, right?
Yeah.
So there's a trade. That's that two equation that.
Could you,
both sides of the equation.
if you guys had fast forwarded, later and you were raising them like now, and you had access to our LLM, would that have made a good substitution, just the LLM instead of the open internet?
I think so, because one, you have to be more proactive in what you do and seek out. Two, no advertising. Right? I remember they would be looking at glance at a computer screen. They had to do it. We had a shared office, and I'd glance over and they were reading some news story, but here's some, alluring advertisements.
It's like porn, basically, in this idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's not porn, but yeah. It's
basically, yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's just going to get harder for parents to have to choose and unplug, and for ourselves personally.
Yeah, but see, that's sort of a theme of things we've been talking about. The cabin in the woods and the forested area, but also because like the LLM, you're plugged into all of human knowledge, basically.
You are.
But it is more proactive. So it's not like just presenting itself constantly.
Right.
But if you need to access it, like it's there.
Yeah.
But it's in a raw format.
The problem is most LLMs, I'm not going to give my kid.
Right.
I'll let my child use our product.
Yeah.
But it's like, what do they can ask a certain question and it's going to give them pretty terrible advice.
Yeah. Because it's like, there's no such thing as neutral education, right? Public.
Well, you said it, all of human knowledge. Well, there's a lot of perverted human knowledge out there.
Right.
And you gotta.
Oh boy, you just opened a whole thing. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This idea.
That's so funny. I was just literally like at 1 a.m. last night. I was talking about
really.
This. You brought that up.
Well, tell me what you're thinking, because that actually is what we're talking about.
Someone brought up the problem was that there's a bunch of people who think that since the Renaissance, science, technology, knowledge is bad, right? I have a hard time getting on board with that. And this person brought up the tree of knowledge, and I'm like, what's interesting? I thought for decades it was the tree of knowledge, and it's not. It's the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah.
Which is a completely different spin. And I think that is the problem. It's like once you think you know what's right and wrong, and you subjectively decide that for yourself, that's where all the problems come from, right? If you abdicate that decision to God, the Bible, Muhammad, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
It's like you don't get all this subjective relativism, nominalism that's destroying the country.
Yeah.
Right? So that's pretty important to understand. You don't lay it at the foot of knowledge. You lay it at the foot of deciding good and evil for yourself.
Yeah, and underlying that is you're okay not knowing everything, like having just certain knowledge. Yes, there's something that you don't know, you haven't experienced.
Yeah.
And this plays out daily for everybody. But it's, being content, it's just like the first class thing. You don't have to fly first class. In fact, it might be bad if you always fly first class for various reasons.
Yeah.
Not indulging. But you also have to have the option to indulge, because then you don't have free will. But
Did you ever read the Tao Te Ching?
No, you told me to,
Yeah,
and I should get in there.
It would take you no time unless you like did it in a serious way. Yeah, so Tao Te Ching is kind of the basis for Taoism, and it's a small book of verses, like 100 of them maybe. One of them, if I remember, Lao Tzu, I think, wrote this, by the way, 3000 BC maybe, like really ancient. One of them is, for the limited, to pursue the limitless is foolish. So you'd love that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was me saying that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is interesting because truth is truth, like throughout the ages. It doesn't matter, like who said what, like either something is true or not. And that is one of the recurring
That
things.
is a truth. That is a universal truth.
Yeah, absolutely. Huh, that's interesting. What got you into that? I think you told me a little bit, but.
So.
And then why aren't you still?
The path was raised Protestant, had a scientific mind, thought it was ridiculous, left that, practiced the church. College, started to get into Eastern religions, and Taoism was.
Why? A professor? Was it
professor? Probably
other students? Was it just the freedom to do so?
No, there was a lot of talk. Zen meditation, Zen Buddhism. There was a lot of talk.
Was this in New York? You went to college in New York?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had seen the Dalai Lama, not personally, but I'd seen him, on TV or something. This is pre-internet. And it's like, wow, I can tell he's a good guy, right? And so you just start to explore it. And as I explored it, man, there's a lot of universal truth in there, right? It may be not a complete truth, and it may be off in certain ways, but there were pieces. And so, so I got to explore. And Taoism, which isn't really religion, it's kind of a philosophy, just like really succinctly captured what I had learned, that I the path that I had come to encompass. That so anyway, explore it.
Did you find yourself drawn to the Stoics, like getting into Stoicism? I feel like that's a very popular thing right now for people who aren't religious. Then get into Marcus.
I took some philosophy. Meditations on Marcus Aurelius. I took some philosophy, and I found a lot, and it could have been my youth and inexperience. I kind of came to the conclusion that most philosophy is just bantering about semantics. It's like just definitional, and it's like, I couldn't find the deep insights that are probably there, and I was just too naive to see them.
You didn't feel like just ignoring everything, basically.
So anyway.
Well, it's interesting. I heard somebody talking about, like there's these 4 basic buckets that you can kind of group anything into: theism, deism, pantheism, etc. And so it's interesting. I wonder where that Tao Te Ching sits within, atheism.
It doesn't. Well, so interestingly enough, I found it interesting that C.S. Lewis wrote a book where he calls it the Tao.
Yeah, he picked that on purpose.
He's trying to not put Western.
That is
Christian
such a fascinating
God
concept
in there.
Yeah.
So he termed it into the Tao. I remember when it hit. I had a class, and I remember an overview, and I remember writing something down. And it was like Taoism just totally clicked. And you should look at it. It's not a religion, but it is a nice collection of wisdom.
Yeah.
Right. Of truths, succinctly stated. These verses, like I said, there's only 100, and they're just short, like I just told you.
Yeah.
That's it. So it's going to take you you can read through it in 30 minutes.
You kind of think about it.
Or you can spend your whole life, dwelling, meditating on each one.
Tell me about the Protestant thing. Was there a specific brand of that? Or
Assemblies of God.
Oh, okay. So I think I understand what you were saying, where you're going with that. But we were also talking about earlier how some people, like, if they just don't want to see something, they're just not going to see it. And you talked about you were scientifically minded. I was having a conversation with somebody. I don't remember exactly who this was. And we were kind of talking about, well, the galaxy, the universe, it seems very old. And here's how you can measure it. You have radiation, background radiation, the light, it takes time to travel. And, but they were a young Earth creationist. And so I'm kind of explaining my position on things. And, they had this statement that kind of threw me for a loop. And I said, everything's real old up in space. You can just see that. And they said, yeah. but God just made our galaxy old, but everything else is young. It's like, so I don't know what they're picturing. Like, why do you have to? It's like someone trying to justify that believes.
They tied themselves in knots trying to.
Yeah, like Noah. We're 6,000 years, 10,000 years, so there was dinosaurs, and those had to be on the ark, so they had to like have the dinosaur eggs were on the ark. And you're like, it's just. Yeah. So I assume that sort of thinking is what was throwing you for a loop.
I have this theory that the best way you can, in my mind, is you can conceive of God is like in a fatherly way, which is why often we're referred to as Father. But I feel like it would be a cruel thing to give man reason and then just constantly intervene and change the laws of physics and the way things work.
Right.
Right? I wouldn't do that to my
That's
kids.
Interesting, yeah.
Like, I might joke around when they're 1 year old, oh, peekaboo, it's gone. Right? But I wouldn't do that in a serious manner to my kids. And so I think we have pretty consistent laws of physics, and that's revealed, and we can study it, and that is the physics is God, right? God is everything. So that's kind of a discovery, cosmological discovery of God, and I think that's immutable.
Yeah, it's funny because I heard a Christian philosopher talking about, there's a verse in the Bible that says, love God with all your heart, mind, body, and soul. One of those is mind. And a lot of people do the heart thing and skip like the other things. And, you're talking about being rational, but the problem is for, someone having a conversation like I was just talking about, you get to the point where, okay, rationally, I have to stop believing then what I thought, and then that's not comfortable. And so you're going to continue to justify, like, is that a personality thing? If someone decides...
I think that's a lot. I think personality has a lot of involvement in, you talked about, you made me think about, like, there's people probably like us that want to keep learning. We do want to pursue. Are limited. We want to keep pursuing as much as we can and learn and feed ourselves. And I wondered, as you were saying it, if that's just, we're made differently, and that's just our version of dopamine, of gluttony.
Yeah.
Is that our version of gluttony? Are we just stimulating ourselves?
Yeah. Okay. I'll tell you about an experiment I did a while back. I never even brought this up to you, but I had a little service I was going to try to just play around with. And it was going to be like a podcast, like a premium podcast that people could pay for, and it was going to help people like be happier. So like science-based.
Okay.
And I realized that was a wrong-headed thing to even shoot for. But I figured, I was looking for like, well, what does everyone just want? Like, everyone wants to be happy, like. And there's like, we talked about Angela Duckworth and grit, and it's like scientifically proven. If you take time to be grateful, if you reflect on stuff that you can be, in the midst of all your hardships, or,
gratitude is huge.
Yeah, like, so there's some things, right, that people can do. And I was like, I'm only one person, but there's all these AI tools. So I was trying out things when they were new on the scene, like 11 Labs will, so obviously you can use generative AI to like produce stuff. So I would have like a happy story where there was an act of kindness, like, and then have it narrated by the AI. And so I was trying to line up like all this content and mass produce it, and actually have it be useful. And actually did have some people sign up. I did just like a trial, and but everyone ended up canceling before the 7 days because it wasn't useful or whatever. So it was an experiment, and it helped me figure out AI and leverage things, when that was early. But as I reflected on that, it was stupid to, especially coming from me of all people, to try to help people optimize for happiness, because that is not even like the thing, the base level.
That effort doesn't ever work.
Yeah, because we're talking about the conversation with the person, and well, this part of the universe is old, but not all. Because they probably, my guess is like it's uncomfortable and they don't want to disturb. Like they're pretty happy like with the way things are mentally, emotionally. Right. Yeah, and so I just realized.
You mentioned wrong-headed, and I've reflected for several years about parenting mistake. I feel we did a decent job, but I feel like I made a big error. There were many times where you pick them up they were doing something, maybe soccer. I don't know what it was, but did you have fun?
Yeah.
Wrong freaking question.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like every time it should have been, did you make someone's day better?
Yeah.
Did you make someone happy?
Or did you learn something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, not even learning.
No?
Not selfishly oriented.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I think simple statements like, did you improve someone's day? Did you make someone happy? Did you compliment someone?
Now we're back to that. Just don't be selfish.
Right. No,
Yeah.
no. And I look back and it's like, missed opportunity.
Yeah.
It's a terrible place to be. I think parents there's some parents who are like it's like, they're born that way. I don't have really much effect. And I'm like completely opposite. It's like, I can take you and make you a feral wolf. Because that's happened.
Yeah.
Right? Kids have grown up with wolves. So
Yeah.
I say you have 100%. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And consequently, like, I took the role very seriously. It's like,
Yeah.
wow. And it's a hard thing because it's like every little detail, every little mistake, it's just like, I could have optimized even more.
Yeah.
So that's not that much fun. But I recommend that to parents. Tell your don't talk about happiness and fun and do it. Have fun and be happy.
Right.
But
that's not
be sure you
everything.
That comes naturally. You
Yeah.
don't need to work on promoting that, right? That's in us. We want to have fun and play.
Yeah.
You know? What doesn't come as naturally is be selfless and improve other people's
Do you
situation.
think, this is interesting. Do you think that happiness for people, because people are that is what so many people are optimizing for, whether it's like distracting themselves with, videos or video games, so their baseline becomes like always trying to be happy so that if they don't,
They're never satisfied.
well, yeah, like it's like a drug
then
and then
you
you
say-
need more and more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So happiness as a drug, kind of.
Well, yeah, happiness is serotonin squirts, right? It's
Yeah.
dopamine.
Oh, we're back to that. That also would be a T-shirt from this
Dopamine
podcast.
screws you.
Exactly.
We need to keep a running list.
Oh, man.
Well, look in our merchandise store.
Yeah, we need to get that set up.
Yeah. I think those are funny. We should definitely do that.
Oh, yeah. Let's have OR agent set that up for us.
it.
I want to hit this before we run out of time, too. Did you see that there's a thing called Regeneron? And I don't know if it's like a shot, but it was administered to 2 completely deaf kids, and it restored most of their hearing or a good chunk of their hearing.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. Wow. What do you think about that?
I think it opens up that whole how far do we go to enhance or improve or repair? Where's your line? Right?
Okay. So if someone was born deaf, is that really repairing? Are you talking about repairing to the capabilities of a human at their full capacity, or to that person's?
Damn, I don't know. What do you think?
I feel like there's a human template, kind of. So I don't. It
Make
doesn't.
them as good as the best human.
I don't know. That feels like. No, no, maybe not. When you put it like that, I guess I don't know. I need to think a little deeper about that.
Yeah,
I
think it takes some thought. So one thing so you mentioned that Regeneron. I think we might have touched on this. The new drug class that for dieting.
Ozempic?
Yeah.
Wegovy? I think it's all the same thing.
The glucogen peptide.
Yeah, we did have a
deal.
little discussion on that.
Yeah, I mean that haunts me for a couple months. It's like, man, we're just moving to a place where it's like, I can eat all the cake I want, all the pizza, and I'll pop my pill and it'll digest a little
But
bit.
are we moving towards that? Because everything's a trade-off and actions have consequences. So you can do that, but it doesn't just fix everything. It doesn't solve everything.
No, but it makes you feel good, and that's what most people are after, right?
But does it though? Because it's almost like that thing where I think it's less
Short-term feel good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's true. Yeah. But Al Roker had that surgery, that like stomach bypass or whatever.
Gastric bypass.
Yeah. Okay. But then, from my understanding, like you can't eat as much food. Like, can you really enjoy the natural process of eating? Then, like everything's a trade off.
Yeah. And that's what haunts me is we just keep pushing for indulgence.
Yeah.
right? And it seems like a bad thing, and that's just why I try to bring it up, and I try to be self-critical. It's like, is my pursuit of knowledge just another example of that,
Oh, yeah, that's true.
right?
But what do you think about like, someone in one of my old jobs once told me, we were talking about why did Jesus show up in the human timeline at the time that he did? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, yeah,
And their answer was like, well, I don't know that there would have been a more optimum time like ever. Previously there weren't the Roman roads to like distribute the information, and several factors like contribute to that. But when I hear something like this, also like, this is sort of like miraculous compared to
yeah.
the
It's
past.
crazy. Well, and they came out with AlphaFold 3,
The protein thing, right?
Google's DeepMind.
Yeah.
So protein folding, if you guys don't know about that, it's been this big deal. It's super computational intensive to figure out how we can know what proteins are made of, but what happens in nature, they end up folding into these patterns, and there's so many variables that affect that we just can't do it. And so early on, there were like screensavers and I was part of this deal. There was a big public consortium of people who gave their computers when they weren't using them, and millions of computers were being used to try and calculate how proteins folded, right? Just nearly impossible. I don't even know if they've ever made any headway. But Google has a division called DeepMind. DeepMind and AI efforts, and one of the things they did was they made AlphaGo to beat the best. It ended up beating the best Go player in the world. And from that, they made AlphaFold. And now then AlphaFold 2 was able to figure out proteins that would take, decades for a person to do. And they could do it, like that. And slowly they're doing hundreds of thousands of them or millions of them. I think it's discovered hundreds of thousands. And now they have AlphaFold 3. And it's just that that curve. There's a phrase I like to use. You've probably heard, gradually, then suddenly.
Oh, yeah.
That's science. That's technology. It's gradually, then suddenly. And suddenly all this is happening, and they can discover new DNA protein sequences and cures they think we're going to cure like most cancers with it. And,
Right.
Okay,
let me ask you this in light of we'll continue a little bit of our discussion last week. You were talking about moving the rocks from the shore to the top, could AI do something novel?
Yeah.
Now, it sounds almost like what you're saying would fit in that novel category, but is it really more like just brute force, like password cracking? Let's try all of these until something works. Or is it actual? And, I don't know enough about it. So from what your understanding is.
I couldn't tell you with AlphaFold how that's working. But AlphaGo, like the experts were like, I remember during it, there was like a move that happened. And all the commentators were like, well, that's it. It lost. That's the dumbest thing we've ever seen. And these are like the best in the world, which probably consequently means the best in history. So all of humanity's knowledge on this one game, they're like, well, that's ridiculous. And then it went on, 15 moves later to win because of this move. And it was like, wow, that is not in any of the book. In chess, you have a book, opening books, lines people have played. Wasn't there. And they
so it had to just be simulation. The thing thought this direction, that direction, that direction.
Yeah, that's the way it used to work, and it doesn't work that way anymore. It's more of a modeling. I mean, there's some of that still, but it's more of a modeling. I'll tell you an interesting experiment I did this week with with AI. I just did a Google search. I said, give me a treasure map that has a grid on it. Look through the images. Here's one, A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Skull and crossbones, treasure, lake.
Yeah.
Okay. Paste that into our AI. I did several different AIs. And I'm like, I'm on C3. Take me to the treasure. How do I move? Right? So, spoiler alert, ChatGPT totally failed it. Didn't even figure out where the treasure was. There's a treasure chest on F7.
Interesting.
Couldn't figure out. But proceeded to hallucinate and tell you, go to D4, D3, and it's like, okay, I end up nowhere.
In the ocean.
There's nothing there.
Yeah.
Right? and multiple times. We did well, and
Nice. We found the treasure.
Jim and I did well.
Oh,
Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
yeah.
And it's like that's kind of bizarre to me, because to me that is the reason I was doing it is, embodied AI robots are coming hard and fast, and the principle in my mind is if you can have LLM understand the environment and then translate that into movement,
Yeah.
which is what I was doing,
Right.
then you're somewhere. You
Yeah.
can do that. So it was an interesting. It doesn't really have to do with what we're talking about, but I thought it was an interesting
that
experiment.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have the data and then the interpretation, and something
And
can
then
do.
the action.
A human can do it. Can the robot? Yeah. That's whether it's just virtual or
Because
that.
if I had to think about it, it's like a 2-year-old couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Maybe a 5 to 8-year-old could do it, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting experiment.
Was the next phase of your experiment going to be to send an actual robot to a real treasure location and like
Oak Island. Oak Island, we're going. No, I've had a desire. I've messed around with robotics for some time. I made a business based on some robotics, but I have kind of a desire to understand: can we interface an LLM to, in my case, it would just be a wheeled robot and have it do some things. I'm curious if that could happen. If I could talk to this small thing and say, "Hey, go touch the tennis ball," and have it move toward it.
I would assume that's doable now somewhere.
It's doable. Yeah.
There's like a $3,000
The question is how
open
much
source
training
Yeah.
does it take?
Oh yeah.
Right? Which is why you talked about China. Are they 6 months away from eating our lunch? Tesla's automated full self-driving, they have, I imagine they're at almost billions of hours of video that they train. And all these edge cases come up. It's like work zone, road closure, tourist, bicycle.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, there's 7 permutations that I've never encountered personally.
Yeah.
Right? But in billions of hours they have.
Yeah.
And that allows them to train their AI such that it can handle it. And nobody, no U.S. company. There's the only company I perceive that might be able to catch them is BYD, which is the biggest electric car company. But okay.
I just remembered something I wanted to bring up, but before I get to that, you were talking about Optimus earlier, and it was doing the battery thing, and you were saying there's other robots that we've had for a long time, and they just can't deviate. If something tips over, it's over.
Yeah.
Okay, but then the battery fell over. I wonder if that really is all that different though. Because in the context, of the batteries, that's one of the things that's going to tip over. So I assume for a demo like that, Tesla's going to say maybe the battery is going to tip over. That's something that could happen.
No, the point of that I'm making there is that nobody's doing that.
Yeah,
It's an emergent property.
But it's one of the only things that could happen in the situation.
Yeah,
and therefore it's still really strict because the situation is a situation.
Yeah, but I imagine it's if you type into objective reality something, I mean, we haven't told it all of the things,
right?
And yet it can figure that out.
Yeah,
and that's the difference now.
It's a lot smarter too now for people wondering. We're constantly upgrading.
We're getting better all the time.
Okay.
I mean, there is that edge case, like I said. Can it be creative past ideas that it had never, not in the history of mankind's knowledge?
Okay, let me ask you this. I was thinking about this since our last podcast, and maybe this is already the way things are happening, or maybe it wouldn't work, but what do you think of this? So, what LLMs are to words, what if you had the equivalent for material, like the material world? If this, then that. So there's going to be a threshold, but beyond, we're talking about PhDs, their job is to, push past, that realm. So for whatever the threshold is for our current understanding, including the corpus of recorded human knowledge, because that is also the understanding of the AI. Let's find a barrier to a threshold that we want to go past. And could you do the LLM basically tries to predict what's coming next?
Yeah.
can you do that in the material world? Like, we don't know what comes past this, but if you had enough input, and I don't know what the size would have to be of the input to be able to make this successful.
That might be AlphaFold.
If this, then
Yeah.
what? And then you maybe wouldn't know for sure, but you could maybe get like 99% of the way there.
Yeah,
and then past that, and then past that.
I mean, that might be what AlphaFold is doing, right? Because it's not a large language model. AlphaFold isn't. It's not doing that. And frankly, Tesla's it's this input, right? So LLMs are trained on tokens of text, all the text that human has created. Tesla's not.
Yeah.
Tesla's looking at the physical world and what happens in the physical world and predicting.
But could you say it's just tokenized the physical things?
But it's not really token. I mean,
It's not?
yeah, it's not. I mean, in
That's
the
not a
end,
good description.
underneath, they're all kind of the same gradient descent algorithm, neural networks. But the input, the input's different. I mean, that's what you're talking about, right? It's like instead of words, we're using. I don't know in this case what it would be, but it's not words. It's like the real world.
Yeah. But the question arose in my head, though. So whether that's what AlphaFold or whatever's doing, would you literally, though, need a God's eye view of all the data to know? It's like the butterfly effect. Like, it flaps its wings over here in South America, and then it has all these effects, and the weather changes over here. But, like, you couldn't know that. You couldn't predict that without a big enough data set. So can you actually go past the threshold, or can you not? Because it's impossible to have that view, even as a machine.
Yeah, so I probably can't go all the way to that point. But what I would say is this God's eye view is
within a realm.
The problem of this is why I think nothing but free markets work. Because you can't centrally plan because you can't know the neurons.
Interesting.
Like you can't model. You can put together a standard economic model and say, okay, unemployment's at 4.9% or 7.2%, and then that's going to do this, and it's going to create demand in these arenas, and consumer price index will do this, and you can make these models.
Yeah.
But it's ridiculously.
I get your point. That's
simple.
True.
It's ridiculously simple because you have no idea what that 2% does to the psychology of people who are unemployed.
Yeah.
Like you're just totally guessing. It's ridiculous, and so therefore, my argument is central planning can never work.
Right.
Unless you're omniscient, unless you're God,
across
things out.
Any application.
But not even that case because God give you free will, and then you might do something different.
But not just in economics, in any modality, maybe.
Probably.
So is there an equivalent then, if you can apply that to everything? And if you're saying capitalism is something that you think works, is there an equivalent to this problem of novelty that takes whatever the essence of what makes things work economically, but applies that towards, solving, going past the thresholds? What would that be?
Like physical thresholds?
Yeah. That doesn't try to do the God's eye view.
I don't know.
Yeah. That's a question for
I
OR.
don't know.
That's the kind of thing, that sort of thing right there is what I would plug in, and probably I could spend 45 minutes or an hour like trying to suss out and enlighten myself.
I can't speak highly enough of using it as a tool for augmenting creative thinking, brainstorming, not to mention just like everyday use. Like fix this code for me. I have a problem with my database query. Fix this for me. Constantly.
I don't do like any coding, but you were telling me are things doing really good with coding?
Unbelievable.
Yeah. What does it help you with? Does it save you hours?
This morning, 7 a.m., I'm feeding in like complex queries that are just almost too hard to wrap your head around. You'd have to hire a DBA database administrator who does this for a living, $150,000 a year, and it's just as good or better.
Yeah.
I mean, I have two guys on the payroll who for one of my companies who do this type of database stuff, and we've been struggling with the speed of some customer data access. And I'm like, well, I really think it's, an index issue and your query performance here, and, struggle for a long time. It's like, guys, did you try AI assistance? And, boom. And it's like,
got it.
It's utterly crazy because if I were to do that, let's say I hired a database administrator and I'm like, here's my query, make that faster. there would be that communication process to him of here's the underlying data, the tables, they call them tables, and here's the columns, and here's the data types that are stored in there. And what I'm really trying to get out is this. And it would take just that communication process and that person to understand and dig into and really comprehend the model of what I'm doing would be a really slow process.
Yeah.
So the time, the money involved, both of us involved. And here it's copy it, paste it, a sentence maybe.
Yeah.
Hey, this is slow. I'm trying to get this.
Yeah.
Done.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like people, and it's because people aren't like using it.
Yeah.
But once they start using it, it's like, yeah, this is.
Right.
I think you were telling me about a friend, or maybe.
I was just going to bring that up.
Like,
We had a user who's one of our beta testers, and the previous feedback from them was like, it's cool. I don't like know when to use it, like what to use it for.
And then
But then they had something where, it was like they were putting together teaching like a Sunday school type of thing, it sounds like. And then they use it and it was awesome, which also got me thinking. I used to have a friend who worked at Logos, the Bible software company. They're based in Washington, I think. In fact, they tried to get me to go work there, went in for the application stuff. But anyways, while they were there, they got me a license like for free as like a perk. And I was like, cool. But at the time, this has been a while back, maybe 10 years or more, it's expensive software because it's like academic Bible study software. A lot of pastors use it and different people, but it's like $1,500, a seat or something. Wow. And I think they've transitioned to a subscription model, but I haven't opened it for a long time. And I got to thinking like, because I just used all the stuff that right. used to do. Like one of the big benefits was it had a huge library of X thousand, commentaries and this and that, and it could cross-reference. But our AI thing, it does all of that
and better
and faster.
Yeah.
And so
we just did that little Ninth Amendment right to privacy thing.
Yeah.
I mean, normally what you would do is you go to Google and you type in what's the U.S. right to privacy stuff, and you'd find a list. And you'd click one, and you'd back to after you scan through the advertisements, and you click it, and you'd kind of okay, I need something different. And you'd go back, and and you'd spend a few minutes doing that, and then you'd Google, okay, bring up the Constitution, and let me see this, and then you'd spend maybe on that one 15 minutes, I don't know, something like that.
Yeah,
and it took you 30 seconds.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and to get the exact text then.
That's right.
Following. I mean, that's a big transformational thing on intelligence. Knowledge. Maybe I won't say intelligence. Maybe we should call this knowledge instead of intelligence.
Well, you as the human will end up knowing something based on it, but the thing doesn't know that it knows, right? That's like the whole thing with the calculator. Is it conscious? Does it know that it's...
That's too speculative. Maybe that's where we end and we can go off and think about it.
Good. Food for thought. So check it out, objectivereality.ai. Like we said, always getting more powerful. We use it all the time. Now we're getting a lot of feedback from our users.
Daily. Constantly.
Yeah, it'll click. Give it a try. And like I said last time, ask it. Sign up, ask it what it can do for you.
Yeah, that's right. That's the way to do it.
All right.